Chapter 1059. It was worth mentioning that after reaching the heavenly strength realm, due to the qualitative change in the vital energy in the human body, their physical fitness would also increase by more than one level. This was especially so for Guan Zhaoshan, who had a special physique. After completing the qualitative change from the airborne realm to the heavenly strength realm, their physical fitness would increase by an even greater number. Therefore, even in a field battle, even if the humans were still at a disadvantage, it was not impossible for them to fight against the monsters. However, the physique was not the biggest shackle that prevented humans from defeating the monsters in a field battle. In ancient times, the ancestors of the monsters were much stronger and wilder than the monsters of today. At that time, humans did not have any strong cities or sharp weapons, but they were able to rely on their physical fitness and various weapons and tools that seemed extremely backward today to almost wipe out the entire group of monsters. The humans of today were living too comfortably. They lived behind the sturdy city walls, protected by all kinds of defensive equipment and formations. In the face of the demon beasts that were no longer as strong as their ancestors, they only needed to defend the cities at the border every year, and they would be able to harvest a large number of demon beast corpses. They had already lost the determination and passion to fight against the monsters in the field. This was unavoidable because of the degradation caused by the advancement of science and technology. However, no one had ever noticed this problem. Even if they had noticed it, they could not do anything about it. They could not tell the various dynasties and the high and mighty guardians of the heavenly gate to switch to the path of cultivation and stop adding skill points to the science and technology tree, right? Therefore, slowly, humans went from being at a disadvantage to being completely defeated in a field battle. It was almost a foregone conclusion. However, at the same time, countless years later, an army that had been established for less than a fraction of the time as compared to the armies of the other dynasties had fought to a stalemate with a terrifying beast tide that came from the depths of the Hungduan Mountains, the territory of the monster beasts. No, this might be a little biased. However, these incomparably valiant soldiers of the northern region had indeed fought against the demonic beasts in the field. They had even managed to stop the demonic beasts from advancing with their inexplicable courage and craziness. For a moment, the demonic beasts could not even tell who was the ferocious demonic beast. This scene fell into the eyes of many people. At most, the high and mighty guardians of the heavenly gate were surprised. However, in the eyes of the top powerhouses of the 6 dynasties, it was not the case. There was a very interesting phenomenon in Lin Yuan's previous life. Every time the dynasty changed on the Asian continent, a powerful armed force would replace the once powerful but gradually declining armed force. It was the same even when the Yellow Emperor replaced the Yang Emperor. In other words, it was from the Yellow Emperor that the saying of conquest appeared when the imperial power of humans changed. Of course, the change of feudal imperial power was basically a game between the aristocratic families. Although there were peasant uprisings that swept the world like the Great Ming Dynasty, it was very rare. Since ancient times, most peasant uprisings were used as training targets for the various dynasties. The more successful one was the Yellow Turban Uprising at the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty. Although it was still destroyed by the Eastern Han Dynasty, it ushered in a chaotic world. The decline of an armed force depended on many factors. For example, if a dynasty was established for too long and everything was tied to the wisdom of the emperor, there would be a lot of decadent and outdated rules. Even if there was a wise emperor, it would be difficult for him to compete with all the important ministers and aristocratic families in the world to abolish or change these decadent rules. A typical example was the Great Ming Dynasty. In the beginning, imperial power was supreme, but later on, civil and military officials competed with each other. Later on, power completely fell into the competition between the eunuchs and the Confucian scholars. Another example was when a dynasty had been stable for too long and suddenly encountered a strong enemy and suffered a loss. Those important ministers in the court swore to die and refused to submit, but later on, those who were stubborn were all killed. Only those who knew how to kneel and speak were left, and only those who knew how to pander to a strong enemy were left. A typical example was the Great Song Dynasty. In terms of population, wealth, and military power, even the Great Tang Dynasty could not compare to it. However, in foreign wars, the Great Song dynasty had always been suppressed. These factors might have appeared in the heaven martial world before, but with the average lifespan of the people in the heaven martial world, the monitoring of the heavenly gate guardians, the threat of the Hungduan mountain range and the endless sea, it was not unreasonable for the 7 great dynasties to exist for so many years. It was only in recent years that variables like Lei Qiusheng and Lin Yuan appeared. The most important thing was that the various great dynasties had never had a problem with their armaments. No matter which dynasty it was, they had fought many foreign wars. Every year, it was normal for them to fight against the Hungduan mountain range's beast tide. No one knew better than the top experts of the various dynasties what it meant to face an army more ferocious than the demonic beasts. This was especially true for the Qingjiang dynasty, which bordered the northern frontier. Even the natural barrier of the Great River was like a joke in front of the northern frontier. At this moment, they were all silent about the war between the northern frontier and the demonic beasts. For a long time, no one dared to say anything because they knew very well that if the northern frontier had any intention of destroying them, their country would be destroyed in a day's time. At the same time, Frost Mirror Khan, who had received the news, was also covered in cold sweat. Even the Shuangjian dynasty, which also did not build a strong city, did not dare to face the demonic beasts head-on like the northern frontier. They could only rely on the speed of their war horses to continuously attack and exhaust or eliminate small groups of demonic beasts. They seemed to have unknowingly provoked an extremely terrifying enemy. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that although the northern frontier army had the upper hand for a while, it was only temporary. After all, this was the Hungduan mountain range. The demonic beasts seemed to be endless. Even if the 6 dynasties joined forces to attack, the demonic beasts would still feel a little overwhelmed. However, it did not mean that the demonic beasts were completely helpless. However, only the northern frontier army was here. This meant that the northern frontier army was fighting against the entire Hungduan mountain range's demonic beasts by themselves. Perhaps it would not be long before the demonic beasts that kept emerging from the Hungduan mountain range would completely destroy this seemingly unstoppable northern frontier army. For a moment, the experts of the 6 dynasties had mixed feelings. They did not know how to describe their feelings at this moment. Although the northern frontier was under the command of the Black Jiao, it was indeed divided into human dynasties. It was even decided that the 7th dynasty would be the northern frontier's allies. From the perspective of humans, they hoped that the northern frontier would win. Chapter 1060. However, the problem was that the actual ruler of the northern frontier was the Black Jiao. The northern frontier had indeed relied on the Hungduan mountain range to grow so quickly. In the eyes of the 6 dynasties, this was no different from a dogfight. If the actual ruler of the northern frontier was Li Zhong, the 6 dynasties would not hesitate at all. They would have gathered their troops and charged into the Hungduan mountain range to relieve the pressure on their allies. At the same time, they would have plundered the Hungduan mountain range ruthlessly. Therefore, from the perspective of these people, they hoped that the northern frontier army would lose. It was very contradictory and complicated. It's about time, right? Lin Yuan, who did not plan to care about the thoughts of the other forces, mumbled softly. His attack on the Hungduan mountain range this time was not just to show off to the monsters in the Hungduan mountain range. More importantly, he wanted to let those people understand that the current military strength of the northern frontier had reached the point where they could attack the Hungduan mountain range on their own. Next, the northern frontier would use the Shuangjian dynasty's invasion as an excuse to attack the Shuangjian dynasty en masse. They would basically take over a large area of territory, and no one would dare to raise any objections. They would even have to think about whether they would become the next target of the northern frontier if they did so. If it was a battle between 2 dynasties, those dynasties that were further away could naturally take sides. However, it was different for the northern frontier. The army of the northern frontier could pass through the Hungduan mountain range at any time. This natural barrier that the other dynasties were helpless against was the best route for the northern frontier to send troops. Apart from the Qingjiang dynasty and the Shuangjian dynasty, the other 4 dynasties were also within the northern frontier's attack range. Soon, another monster horde formed by monsters appeared on the battlefield. However, the main body of this monster horde was basically the mountain-shaking ape, nine-colored deer, diamond ape, and other monsters from the Stoneclaw forest. In other words, these were all Lin Yuan's subordinates. What was even more interesting was that even though the Stoneclaw forest was located in the outer region of the Hungduan Mountains, after the recent changes, the demonic beasts under the Beast Lord Kirin and the three Beast Kings broke out of the encirclement and disappeared one after another. Furthermore, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce deliberately gave resources to these demonic beasts, and the Northern Frontier Ministry of Works created equipment for these demonic beasts. These demonic beasts in the tribes near the Stoneclaw forest could be considered one of the top demonic beasts in the Hungduan Mountains. When they gathered together, even those large demonic beasts with countless years of history would have to bow their head. When human technology was combined with even more ferocious and valiant demon beasts, the demon beasts in the vicinity of the Stoneclaw forest had already become existences in a different dimension compared to the other demon beasts. If even a human wearing a variety of equipment could contend against a demonic beast, then how terrifying would a demonic beast wearing custom-made equipment be? Not long after, another beast horde charged into the battlefield. The leader was a pitch-black ape with hands that looked like prawn pincers. That was Moro, the first demon beast created by Lin Yuan, or rather, the Inferno Demon Beast. Behind it was a mighty army of Inferno Demon Beasts that were born in the Scarlet Flame Swamp. Although Lin Yuan hadn't set foot in the Hungduan Mountains for a long time, he had never stopped making arrangements in the Hungduan Mountains. He had already done something like showing off his muscles, so it wouldn't be good if he continued to hide it. Before the various forces could recover from their shock, another group of cavalrymen appeared in the vicinity of the Demon Beast Forest. These cavalrymen basically had some beast characteristics on their bodies. The armor they wore and the weapons they held in their hands were all products of the Northern Frontier Ministry of Works. The demon beasts under their command were mainly horses, deer, and wolves. They were all demonic beasts that lived on the side of the Demon Beast Forest near the northern frontier. Although it had long been known that Black Jiao had been secretly subduing the demonic beasts, such as Kagura, Xiao Yen, and other outstanding demonic beasts, all of them had basically taken refuge under Lin Yuan's command. No one knew how many demonic beasts there were under Lin Yuan's command. But today, these demonic beasts from the northern frontier directly showed their weapons. There are so many of them. There are at least 500,000 of them. It's almost the total combat power of the demonic beasts from the entire northern frontier. An expert from Qingjiang who was watching the battle sucked in a breath of cold air. He gritted his teeth and said, "If our intelligence system is correct, then all the demonic beasts from the northern frontier have taken refuge under Black Jiao's command. Even some of the demonic beasts' forest near the northern frontier are the same. Many of the demonic beasts' forest's warhorses are the specialties of the Frost Mirror grassland. They are the warhorses of the Frost Mirror cavalry, which is not something that can be bought with money. There must be some demonic beasts that help the Frost Mirror cavalry to raise horses that have taken refuge in the northern frontier." The demonic beast's sudden appearance caught everyone off guard. Who would have thought that Black Jiao, who had been operating the northern frontier and was even active in the Endless Sea not long ago, had unknowingly taken in all the demonic beasts nearby? They also didn't know why the number of demon beasts under Lin Yuan's command far exceeded the detailed number reported by their intelligence personnel. At this moment, they only knew one thing. The Hungduan Mountains were in trouble. Moreover, the Shuangjin dynasty, which was currently attacking the northern frontier, was also in trouble. But the problem was, they could ignore the demon beasts in the Hungduan Mountains, but could they ignore the barbarians in the Frost Mirror Prairie? Yes, everyone had to admit that the Shuangjin barbarian, who seemed to have a screw loose in their heads and only knew how to kill and plunder, did not have a good relationship with others. This was especially true for the Shunwu dynasty and the Kumu dynasty, which were neighboring the Frost Mirror Prairie. They couldn't wait to tear the barbarians in the prairie apart. Even if the Shuangjin dynasty didn't border the Frost Mirror Prairie, whose caravans hadn't been robbed and killed by the barbarians, many tribes on the Frost Mirror grassland had been wiped out by some powerful forces because they had robbed something they shouldn't have and killed someone they shouldn't have. At the very least, they would find quests in the mercenary guild to wipe out these tribes. But while the barbarians were detestable, their nomadic customs also limited their range of activity. If they didn't have the terrain of the grasslands, the combat strength that the barbarians could display would be nothing compared to the demonic beasts when they fought in positional warfare and mountainous warfare. Ignore it. Watch the black Jiao devour the frost mirror prairie? But even if they did, it would be useless. After all, no matter how fast the cultivators could run, they couldn't reach the battlefield immediately. Besides, the cultivators in the military weren't very strong individually. They mainly practiced all kinds of battle formations and joint attacks. 80% of them would be exhausted if they tried to fly to the northern land or the frost mirror grassland from their own territory like ordinary cultivators. If they ran into a ferocious army like the northern land, wouldn't they be lining up to deliver their heads to the enemy? Wouldn't that give the Black Flood Dragon an excuse to attack them after they delivered their heads to the enemy? Chapter 1061. Even the Azure River Empire, which was the closest, didn't dare to bare their fangs at the northern frontier. After all, no one knew what the Hungduan mountain range or the Shuangjian dynasty would think after the northern frontier showed its power. However, everyone in the Azure River Empire, from the emperor to the civil and military officials, was afraid. What did an army that could fight head-on with the demonic beasts deep in the Hungduan mountain range mean? It meant that once this army set foot in the Azure River Empire's territory, no one in the entire Azure River Empire's army would be able to withstand two move. Relying on the cities and defense equipment to stall for time until reinforcements arrived. What a joke! Did they really think that the demon Venerable from the southern wilderness had been hiding in the southern wilderness for so many years because it didn't have any ambition? If it didn't have any ambition, it wouldn't have created any money-squandering dens or gentle villages. It hadn't moved for so many years only because it was suppressed by the Azure River Empire and the Chuyun Empire. In addition, there were some Heavenly Gate guardians with ambiguous attitudes, which made the demon Venerable from the southern wilderness afraid of attacking the rat for fear of breaking the vases. However, it had done a lot of things to harm the two empires in secret. Otherwise, the truth of the gentle villages wouldn't have been exposed. No one knew exactly how terrifying the Black Jiao's background was, but what was certain was that the Heavenly Gate Guardians probably didn't even have the guts to face it head-on, let alone punish it. They were afraid that they would be crushed to death by some big boss that popped out of nowhere. Therefore, riding on the momentum of the Black Flood Dragon, the southern wasteland came out in full force and bit off a piece of meat from the Azure River Empire. Wasn't this a normal thing? Everyone knew what had happened in the Chuyun Empire recently. From the emperor to the officials, they were all killed by the Black Jiao's divine thunder. Fortunately, there were still local officials, sects, and aristocratic families. Otherwise, the Chuyun Empire, which had a long history, would have been destroyed by the Black Jiao's divine thunder. Under such circumstances, the southern wilderness had already taken action and at least robbed 2 counties and 17 cities from the Chuyun Empire. If it weren't for the demon Venerable being injured, this result might have been more than 3 times greater. Long-term vision and structure. How could those things compare to the benefits in front of him? Even the demon master himself did not believe that Black Jiao had the ability to kill him. After all, the Black Jiao had paid a huge price to summon 2 bolts of divine thunder from the Hungduan mountains. If both bolts of divine thunder hit the demon master, or if the demon master was stabbed, the demon master would probably be finished. Since the Black Jiao did not do so, it meant that the Black Jiao could not afford that price. The southern wasteland venerable monster, who had never lost since his rise, naturally cultivated an invincible aura. Even this time, he only admitted that Black Jiao's methods were strange, but he never thought that he would lose to the Black Jiao. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said such harsh words to the Black Jiao. At this moment, the Qingjiang Empire did not even dare to support the Shuangjian dynasty, let alone support them. At least the Shuangjian dynasty could still put up a fight against the fierce army of the northern frontier. However, if it was the Qingjiang Empire, they would be bitten to death by the northern frontier. Of course, at this moment, countless people were wondering about another thing. Where was the Sky Demon? What was the Sky Demon doing? The Sky Demon had experts on his side. Why didn't he take advantage of such a good opportunity to attack the northern frontier when he knew that the main force of the northern frontier was fighting with the demonic beasts of the Hungduan Mountains and the border defense army was fighting with the Frost Mirror grassland? Why was he wandering in the almost empty south of the Shunwu dynasty? Could it be that the Black Jiao had done something in secret? This was not impossible because the Black Jiao was currently attacking the Hungduan Mountains. Although the Great Wall of the northern frontier was isolated from the other forces by the formation, the northern frontier had been established for a long time after all. All the forces had a clear understanding of the military strength of the northern frontier. At this moment, the northern frontier was not empty, but it was definitely not in a good condition. What gave the Black Jiao the courage? How could he ignore the border defense and directly attack the Hungduan Mountains when the Sky Demon and the Shuangjian Barbarian were waiting for him? Moreover, why did the central plains of the Shunwu dynasty and the Sky Demon in the south not attack the northern frontier? It couldn't be that the two sides had inexplicably reached some secret agreement, right? This was not very possible. If it were them, if they were in existence like the Sky Demon that could not be killed, they would definitely destroy the northern frontier at all costs if they encountered the northern frontier that could kill them. Even if they did not have such an opportunity, they would constantly create opportunities. How could they let the northern frontier grow? Unfortunately, the natives of the Tianwu world were destined to not understand the reason. Only Lin Yuan, Yang Mai, and the incarnation of the sect leader of Tongtian, whose alias was Kang, knew. The Sky Demon was an existence created by the Nether River ancestor with the water of the Nether Blood Sea mixed with his own negative emotions. It was immortal and did not have a physical body. It was filled with all kinds of negative emotions. This was the characteristic of the Nether Blood Sea. Therefore, there was not much difference between the Sky Demon and Lin Yuan's Nether River creatures. Even if there was a difference, it was because Lin Yuan's use of the Netherrealm's Blackwater was not as good as the Nether River ancestors' use of the Nether Blood Sea. Therefore, although the Sky Demon seemed incomparably ferocious, except for a few second-generation Sky Demons, they did not have their own intelligence. They completely followed the orders of their creator. For example, the Nether River ancestor could follow the rules of the Heavenly Gate Protector to first focus on the northern frontier. Later, when he saw that the situation was not right, he moved his main force to the south. However, what happened next forced the Nether River ancestor to temporarily cut off his connection with the Sky Demon. First, the will of the world and the incomplete source of the heavenly Tao worked together to protect Lin Yuan and fought with Hongjuan's projection. In the end, Hongjun took the initiative to leave the Tianwu world. Second, the world was about to be repaired. The secret of the Tianwu world's birth was very likely to be revealed at this time. Therefore, the sect leader of Tongtian would definitely not allow other forces to interfere with his treasure hunt. He could not do anything to Yang Mai, Daoist Red Cloud, Hanba, or Lin Yuan. However, this was originally part of his plan. He would definitely not allow the Nether River ancestor to interfere. Third, although Hongjuan's projection disappeared from the Tianwu world in a flash, the aura that leaked out still attracted the Yang Mai ancestor who had been cultivating in the Sea of Bitterness. Fourth, after the Yang Mai ancestor came, although she did not catch Hongjun who had left the chaotic world, she discovered the secret of the Tianwu world. She did not know where she captured two fox demons, but they were killed by Lin Yuan. Then, she put the weight on Lin Yuan. She had been cultivating in the Sea of Bitterness outside the Heavenly Gate. With such a powerful person keeping watch, how would the Nether River ancestor dare to come? Therefore, the Sky Demon did not take the opportunity to attack the northern frontier. Chapter 1062. Since everyone is here, let's not rest. Our target is the Monster King's court. Anyone who blocks our way will be killed without mercy. Lin Yuan calmly added the Inferno beasts, the northern frontier beasts, and the demi-human army into his command system. Then, he decisively gave the order to continue forward. When the allied army killed the remaining beasts and began to move towards the Monster King's court, he brought Lin Yuantu to the battlefield that was still filled with the pungent smell of blood. After Lin Yuantu set foot on the battlefield, his face revealed an excited expression. He was panting like a pervert. After all, The battlefield was filled with the smell of blood. In addition, there were broken limbs all over the ground. To any intelligent life, this place was like hell. However, it was the most suitable environment for asuras. Just by standing in such a place, an asura would enter a frenzied state of battle. It was similar to the kind of adrenaline rush that was surging. And this was also the reason why Lin Yuan brought Lin Yuantu to this battlefield. Asuras. They would not rest until death. They were brave and fearless. They were crazy and passionate warriors. Such an army was not something that anyone could refuse. Even if there was no environment like the Asura realm that could allow asuras to be reborn endlessly, the Asura realm would be created sooner or later. The more asuras there were, the earlier the Asura realm would appear. At that time, even if asuras had died in battle, they would be able to return from the Asura realm. Compared to the so-called undying, asuras were the real undying army. They were also the trump card that Lin Yuan needed to have when he planned to conquer the myriad worlds in the future. Relying on the incense power produced by the Sky Martial world to fight against Hong Jun, the ruler of the Great Desolate Era, who had at least 33 layers of heaven in the heavenly court, was not king battle. It was like smashing an egg against a rock. Conquering the myriad worlds, Lin Yuan lowered his head in silence, an inexplicable light flashing in his eyes. In his previous life, he was a very smart person. After taking over his family's business, he was able to expand rapidly without breaking the law and become a well-known enterprise in the city. He was only a step away from being listed and collectivized because he didn't have the right opportunity and the right investors. Then, he ushered in a life that could be described as a nightmare. After that, in order to take revenge, he began to learn all kinds of skills, including but not limited to languages, hand-to-hand combat, firearms use, hacker technology, disguise, tracking, and anti-tracking. Lin Yuan's talent wasn't weak in the first place in his previous life, and under the pressure of hatred that made people go crazy with each passing day, he had almost turned himself into an ice-cold machine. Every day, he spent his time learning and training as if he was torturing himself. After that, he trained a new body and underwent plastic surgery. Even his voice was changed through surgery. Sometimes, after drinking and looking at himself in the mirror, he didn't even recognize himself. After that, he found a suitable opportunity to infiltrate the target's side. Unfortunately, before he could make a move, because of some accident, he exposed himself. After that, he chased to kill, escaped, hid, continued to investigate, and chased to kill. At the end of his memory, when he couldn't even muster a trace of strength, he fell into a coma. When he woke up again, he was already in the Sky Martial world. Lin Yuan boasted that he wasn't a kind person, but when it was within his power, he didn't mind doing a few good deeds. After coming to the Sky Martial world, he realized how wrong he was. Sometimes, a small act of kindness could bring about a disaster that could topple the heavens. He could even think back to his previous life. If it wasn't for the backstabbing of the company's executives, he wouldn't have been able to react before being utterly defeated by the other party. Even if he managed to stabilize the situation with great difficulty, the other party still managed to find the address of his family through these traitors, giving him a fatal blow when he was on the verge of collapse. Now that he thought about it, why did those executives dare to betray him? Was it just because the other party offered a high enough price? It was only because he was a little too gentle in his previous life that those people had the guts to betray him. Then, knowing the whole process, they took the other party's offer as a bargaining chip and made an invalid defense for the other party in court. They had completely forced him onto a path that he would never have taken in the past. After coming to the Sky Martial world, he had seen too much of the law of the jungle. He had learned how to dance on the tip of a knife. Lin Yuan had done many things, killed many people who didn't need to die. If his previous self were to evaluate him, the current him would definitely be evaluated as an inhumane lunatic with no bottom line, a butcher, a demon. Back then, when he faced the young miss of the Liu family, Lin Yuan could protect her. After that, when he made an exchange with Guan Zhaoshan, when he faced Lei Qiuming, spiritual master he and the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother, he was still angry. This made him feel that he was still human. But thinking back, when he started to lose his kindness and humanity, It wasn't in the Sky Marshal continent. It was when he walked out of the court that day and saw his enemy, who was clearly guilty but was acquitted with all kinds of evidence, smiling at him with contempt. He couldn't be considered a human anymore, right? But now, all the sins he had committed, all the schemes he had hatched, were all for the sake of returning to the world of his previous life, and then trampling on his enemy, making him sink into the black water of the underworld realm and experience the pain he had experienced, until the end of everything. In the process, how many people had he become the enemy of? He didn't know, and he didn't want to know, but he was very clear that as time passed, more and more people would treat him as an irreconcilable enemy. So he couldn't have the slightest bit of kindness or weakness. He had to give up what he had to give up, and kill what he had to kill. Even if he had no interest in conquering the 10,000 worlds, he had to do it, and he had to do it to the best of his ability. This was the only growth that the lessons of his previous life had given him. I'm really a sinner. Fortunately, I'm no longer human. Lin Yuan laughed self-deprecatingly, then turned his head to the excited Lin Yuantu, and said indifferently, I brought you here to let you do things, not to let you smell the blood like a pervert and be intoxicated. Can you give me an answer? If not, we will go directly to the next target point. Don't waste time here. Yes. Why not? It's simply too good. The excitement on Lin Yuantu's face didn't diminish at all. He slowly spread out his hands, and blood-red Azura demon chi gathered in his palms to form a blood-red ball of light. Wisps of Azura demon chi flowed out from the ball of light, falling into the mountain of corpses, the sea of blood, and the broken limbs. Chapter 1063. Li Zhongsheng's act of using the Northern Frontiers law to boost morale was enough to make Lin Yuan clap his hands and applaud. But in reality, Li Zhongsheng's words were no different from a fart. Where is this place? This is the Hengduan mountain range. This is the hotbed of monster beast. The smell of blood on this battlefield was so strong that even the wind couldn't blow it away. On the contrary, the smell of blood that was blown away by the mountain wind would attract countless hungry predators. Let alone tomorrow, even if the Northern Frontiers search team set out now, by the time they arrived at this battlefield, they would only see bones and minced meat all over the ground. This didn't even include the soldiers of the Northern Frontier who were torn apart and crushed by the monster beasts during the battle. But fortunately, Lin Yuan had set up a name in the command system. Every dead soldier's name would be grayed out in the command system. After returning to the Northern Frontier, they would know who died in the battle and who deserted. Well, in any case, so far, only the soldiers of the Northern Frontier who died in the battle didn't leave the battlefield without permission. This point, Lin Yuan, who was in the state of the Eye of God, saw it clearly. However, Li Zhongsheng was still a crazy person in the end. He didn't clean up the battlefield after the battle ended. Under Lin Yuan's command, he hurriedly led a large number of troops and began to march towards the Monster Beast Palace. He didn't even leave behind a group of people to deal with the corpses here. With the tragic degree of this battlefield, if the corpses here weren't dealt with, in less than half a month, this old battlefield would turn into a plague source. Who knew how much damage it would bring to the Northern Frontier and the Hengduan mountain range? However, could this be considered normal? After all, Shunlin Jun had always been an invincible existence. From the beginning to the end of the battle, not many of them would die. Moreover, cleaning up the battlefield and dealing with the corpses were dirty and tiring work that definitely wouldn't be done by troops like Shunlin Jun. Therefore, Li Zhongsheng, who came from Shunlin Jun, really didn't have the concept of dealing with the corpses after the battle. Even if his subordinates who graduated from the Northern Frontier Military Academy noticed this, they didn't have time to tell Li Zhongsheng before they received the order to move out. Lin Yuan's trip was naturally to deal with these corpses. As Lin Yuantu's demon chi continued to leak out, the corpses on the ground began to wriggle. Not long after, monsters with black or red skin gathered together from the original corpses and minced meat, forming monsters of different shapes and sizes. At least some of them still retained their human form, but they looked scarred. Some of their limbs were even replaced by beast claws. They didn't even have the concept of limbs anymore. Although they weren't at the level of the 1,000 arms Azura, 5 or 6 arms could be considered basic. There were also some who maintained the posture of a monster beast, but there were a few more human arms and legs on their backs. Lin Yuan looked at these newborn asuras. He didn't know where to start cursing in his heart. It wasn't a joke to say that asuras belonged to the 6 paths of the netherworld. Sure enough, those handsome asuras in novels were all made up. Looking at these newborn asuras, Lin Yuan really wanted to ask them what they had to do with the stitched monsters in some of his favorite works. There was a reason why this race was so ugly. When the asuras stood up one after another and lined up before Lin Yuan just looked at Lin Yuan speechlessly. The coldness in his eyes was so cold that it was almost tangible. Lin Yuan shrugged and then snapped his fingers. These strange asuras began to kill each other without any warning. Then, the battle in front of him went from a fight to a massacre. The surviving asuras began to become more and more powerful. When there were only about 500 asuras left, Lin Yuan snapped his fingers again. Then, this fight that happened without any warning stopped without any warning. Lin Yuan smelled the pungent smell of blood in the air and looked at the asuras, who had reached the late stage of the airborne realm on average. He then looked down at the minced meat on the ground, and then looked at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan spread his hands helplessly and said, "The Azura demonic chi can infect anything into asuras, or it can absorb the power of the target and gradually turn them into lunatics. However, the Azura demonic chi can only be used on the same target once. I've already awakened these corpses once. It's useless to put more Azura demonic chi into them." At this point, his eyes fell on the asuras when they were still alive. He smirked and said, "But, with them around, wouldn't it be easy to slaughter some small tribes living in the monster forest or the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains? By then, there will only be more and more asuras under your command, and they will become stronger and stronger. Then go ahead and do it." Lin Yuan glanced at Lin Yuan indifferently, and immediately added, "Remember, kill them all. The ecological balance in the Hungduan Mountains is very fragile. Instead of causing an ecological imbalance, it is better to clean it up directly and wait for the demonic beasts from other places to migrate over. Then, remember to clean up the corpses as well. When there are no more demonic beasts nearby that can be slaughtered, turn around and go to the Chuyun dynasty to teach them how to face the northern region." The monsters under the command of the northern frontier had already set off for the monster palace. The weak cubs had already been escorted to the northern frontier by the association of the Monster Emperor. As such, even if Lin Yuan were to kill the entire Hungduan Mountains at this moment, there would not be any casualties. He would also not have any psychological burden because of such an order. Because this was the first lesson that the Tianwu world had taught him, being weak would only lead to death. In his previous life, he had lived in a legal and civilized world. Even though there was a lot of darkness under the light, it was this kind of light that protected the majority of people, so that they did not have to live in a bloody world. Even though it was the opposite, Lin Yuan was still grateful for the environment that he had lived in his previous life. However, in a world like the Tianwu world, being weak would lead to death. It was a very normal thing. Other than Lin Yuan, who had come from another world, who initially found it strange and soundproof, everyone, from the false gods to the mortals, felt that it was natural. Since he did not have the ability to change the entire world, he could only change himself. Let it be natural. At least, that was the case for now. Hearing Lin Yuan's order, Lin Yuan, who had been smiling excitedly, seemed to grin even wider. He did not know whether it was an illusion or not. Chapter 1064. Northern Frontier Army, Northern Frontier Monster Beasts, Inferno Monster Beasts, Demi-Human Tribe, Original Monster Beast Palace. When these 5 forces gathered together, it only meant one thing. Before they arrived at the Monster Beast Palace, they were absolutely invincible against the giant monster clans that had been passed down for countless years. This army followed Lin Yuan's orders without any rest or mercy. They set off from the Stonetalan forest and chose the shortest route to the Monster Beast Palace. They didn't even bother to negotiate with the monster clans that they met along the way. As long as the clans behind them had nothing to do with the northern frontier, the entire army went straight to them. Along the way, they slaughtered no less than 37 monster clans. Even the monster beasts of the desolate monster realm that were once on par with the 3 monster kings in the Hungduan Mountains were killed by them. Just like the humans, the monster clans had been living a peaceful life for a long time. They even forgot when was the last time they suffered such a heavy loss. It was as if they were still on land back then. They were chased all the way to the Hungduan Mountains. Only when they reached the Hungduan Mountains did they manage to gain a foothold in the Hungduan Mountains. They imitated the humans and pushed out the Monster Beast Palace, choosing a ruler called Monster King. The monsters had been suppressed in the Hungduan Mountains for countless years. As the Monster King Kirin ascended to the throne, the monsters finally revealed their true strength. Although they couldn't restore the glory of their ancestors, they were able to gain a firm foothold in the Hungduan Mountains. For example, the Shunwu dynasty and other weaker dynasties didn't even dare to go deep into the Hungduan Mountains to hunt. They only dared to hunt near the Monster Beast Palace. But this time, the attack from the northern frontier made the monsters who had been living a peaceful life for a long time realize that war was coming. The monsters and soldiers of the northern frontier riding on monsters, wearing heavy armor, and holding all kinds of weapons were not something that normal monsters could stop with their flesh and blood. Even before these knights started to charge, there would be a group of huge monsters that didn't have any knights but were also wearing heavy armor, such as rhinoceroses, wild bulls, forest elephants, and so on. This kind of feeling. It was like 2 armies facing each other. Just as you were about to set up your chariots, horses, and cannons, your opponent directly raised the city wall and charged at you. After this round of charging, even if there were some monsters that were lucky enough to survive, before they could get up, the knights behind them would immediately roar and charge at them with weapons that could be used as battering rams. Once again, the monsters that had been plowed on one side would be plowed on the other side. Usually, after this round of attack, no matter whether they died or not, they would be turned into meat paste. Want to run away? The archers of the Northern Territory and the demonic beasts that specialized in long-range demonic arts were not just for show. The specially made astral-piercing crossbows had a certain suppressive effect on demonic power. Even if the demonic beasts had rough skin and thick flesh, they still could not compare to those who wore iron armor. In the face of the divine mechanical crossbows, which could create a rain of arrows with just a pull of the trigger, the demonic beasts were like wheat being harvested in autumn. Of course, there were also the careful human knights and demi-human knights of the northern frontier. They constantly patrolled around the battlefield, surrounding and killing the monsters that tried to escape or approach the battlefield. They didn't fight head-on. Instead, they used their long lances and crossbows to make the monsters pay a terrible price. If the monsters were particularly lucky, for example, if they weren't in the path of the 2 rounds of charging and weren't within the attack range of the knights and archers, they could naturally choose to play dead. However, there was no doubt about this because the northern frontier infantry that followed closely behind would use all kinds of long weapons and monster-catching nets to deal fatal damage to every monster's corpse while ensuring absolute safety. They couldn't run away, they couldn't run over, they couldn't even play dead. F***ck, so annoying. This was the thought of all the commanders of the monster clans who led the monsters under their command in an attempt to stop the attack of the Northern Frontier Coalition army. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, this kind of crushing attack wouldn't last for too long, as he had been tailing behind the Northern Frontier Coalition army. From the moment Lin Yuan and Lin Yuantu arrived at the first battlefield, the great monsters of the Hungduan mountain range had used some unknown method to block the prying eyes of outsiders. Even Lin Yuan's Eye of God was affected and couldn't see everything clearly. He could only reluctantly follow the movements of the Northern Frontier army. This was also because of the existence of the command system built by the power of incense. However, after all, he had fought so many battles, big and small. With Lin Yuan's aptitude, other than his own cultivation, he learned everything very quickly. Therefore, Lin Yuan himself already had a certain level of military literacy. He wasn't sure if Li Zhongxing had noticed it or not, but as an outsider, he wouldn't be blinded by the victory. Instead, he keenly noticed that the closer they got to the Monster King's court, the more demonic beasts were guarding the roads. Moreover, the demonic beasts' troop types were getting more and more complicated. It was obvious that the big clans had already joined forces. Moreover, They seemed to have chosen the Monster King's Court as their gathering point. In the following journey, the Northern Frontier Coalition army would probably have a harder time winning. They would also start to suffer casualties. When they arrived outside the Monster Imperial Court, there would most likely be a fierce battle with at least a 50% chance of winning waiting for them. Should I continue to increase the stakes? It feels very dangerous. Lin Yuan, who was following behind, thought to himself. As he flew, he brainstormed. This time, the display of strength was already very exaggerated. The valiance of the Northern Frontier Army, the monsters with custom-made equipment, the inferno monsters that obeyed orders, and all the demi-human tribes living in the Northern Frontier, these bargaining chips were already enough to make the various empires' attitude towards the Northern Frontier Army unclear. But if he continued to increase the stakes, there was a saying in his previous life, the fear of humans often came from the unknown. But sometimes, if you knew too much, it would instead give people a huge psychological pressure. Under this kind of pressure, humans who didn't have enough endurance would only go crazy. And if the natives of the Sky Martial world went crazy, they would most likely disregard everything and form an army to attack the Northern Frontier. They would probably hold the thought that no matter what, they would first have to deal with the Northern Frontier Army. Otherwise, no one would be able to have a good night's sleep. Although the Hungduan mountain range was disturbed by an unknown power, and the experts of the outside world were unable to spy on it, no one would be so naive to think that only the Northern Frontier Army had cooperated with the monsters. For example, the remaining members of the Zhu clan, Heaven's Justice Army, and other forces had secretly cooperated with the monsters. It was just that they weren't as close as the Northern Frontier Army, and they didn't do it openly. Chapter 1065. However, regardless of the relationship between these forces and the Hungduan Mountains, there was one thing that was certain. The overall strength of the Alliance army that attacked the Hungduan Mountains from the northern frontier would definitely be leaked. After all, the existence of the Skylight was not just for show. Previously, when they intercepted and killed the intelligence personnel from the northern frontier, the Skylight had contributed. Who could guarantee that there were no members of the Skylight among the monsters in the Hungduan Mountains? Therefore, this was the problem that Lin Yuan found troublesome. Should he raise the stakes or not? He was not someone who gambled heavily. He would only make decisions that were similar to gambling when necessary. Right now, he knew that the monsters in the Hungduan Mountains would gather near the Monster King's Court and then fight head-on with the Alliance army of the northern frontier. However, the other party had sent out so many monsters to obstruct the northern frontier. On one hand, it was to delay the marching speed of the northern frontier so that more monsters would gather near the mountain range named King's Court. On the other hand, it was also to use the time these monsters were destroyed and the number of casualties they caused to the Alliance army of the northern frontier to deduce the overall strength of the Alliance army of the northern frontier. Lin Yuan had never doubted that this mountain range that was full of secrets was so powerful. After all, in the underwater secret realm, the inherited memory that Lin Yuan obtained was not so simple. Although he never actively recalled the existence of the inherited memory, it was still a super big shot who lived in ancient times, and most likely a dragon bloodline demon beast. Otherwise, the central area of the underwater secret realm would not only be accessible to those with dragon bloodline, but also to those with dragon bloodline to obtain the inherited memory inside. Only God knew how many of such existences were lurking in the Hungduan Mountains. Only God knew how many of such existences were still alive, like the few ancestral dragons from the Four Seas Dragon clan. It was still the same sentence. The foundation of the Hungduan Mountains was laid out here, and there was no human who did not covet it. In Lin Yuan's eyes, the reason why the Heavenly Gate Guardians, who were cowardly and greedy, did not touch the Hungduan Mountains was definitely not just to leave the Hungduan Mountains and stabilize the power structure of the Seven Empire. As for how many old monsters there were, perhaps only those old monsters themselves knew. He still had other cards in his hands. For example, the two armies that were modeled after the Western fantasy demons and the undead had yet to be deployed. If these two armies were included, then the strength of the northern frontier might not be able to expand to the point where they could sweep through the Hungduan mountain range. However, If they could follow the Stoneclaw Forest and directly attack the Monster King's court, there would be no problem at all. But none of those old monsters had expressed their stance yet. The Eye of the God was not completely unusable, but the prerequisite was to use the power of Joss flames and not demonic power. This meant that the existence that blocked the Eye of the God was also using the power of Joss flames, and could only use a power of the same level to offset it. Lin Yuan also roughly estimated the approximate area that was blocked. He dared not say much, but it was definitely more than 60,000 miles. To block such a large area, a large amount of Joss flames would be consumed every second. Thinking of the stingy demon ancestors in the Endless Sea, as well as the almighty guardians of the Heavenly Gate who rarely took action, this kind of expenditure of Joss flames was definitely not in line with the style of the Tianwu world's natives. Therefore, the ones who took action were either experts from other worlds, or many demon ancestors working together to block this area. Most of the experts from other worlds did not dare to make a move at this time. Even if they really did exist, they would have ulterior motives. For example, he had not seen Hanba, Hongyun, and the others for a long time. At this moment, they were probably waiting for the world to be repaired so that they could snatch the treasure. Inside, there was the incarnation of Tongtian. Outside, there was ancestor Yang Mai. At this moment, although the Tianwu world did not seem to have changed, a storm was brewing in the dark. Even those natives who had touched the false god realm would die if they were not careful. Then, here came the interesting part. Since there were many demon ancestors in the Hengduan mountain range, and even the guardians of the Heavenly Gate were afraid of them, why did these demon ancestors not take action when the Sky Demon, the Undying, and the Inferno Demon beasts were causing trouble? The desolate demons in the Hengduan mountain range had joined forces with the Inferno Demon beasts and the Undying to severely injure the Beast Master Kirin and make him flee. These demon ancestors did not stand up for the Beast Master Kirin, which meant that they had tacitly approved of this matter. However, since they stood against the Beast Master Kirin, they could only watch as the Beast Master escaped from the Hengduan mountain range. In other words, the fact that the heavily injured Beast Master Kirin was able to escape from the Hengduan mountain range was probably due to the demon ancestors' help or tacitly approval. In any case, if Lin Yuan had given up on the Beast Master Kirin and chose the other side, he would definitely not have allowed the Beast Master Kirin to leave the Hengduan mountain range alive. If these demon ancestors took action, no matter how heaven-defying the Beast Master Kirin's methods were, what could he do? Including now, Lin Yuan led the Northern Frontier Army into the Hengduan mountain range and went straight to the Monster King court. These demon ancestors did not stand up either. They only joined forces to block the possibility of this place being sensed by others. However, they did not have the slightest intention of being biased. None of them stood up to support Lin Yuan in his bid to become the Beast Master, nor did they stand up to directly ask Lin Yuan to leave. It was too strange. Or rather, it was too contradictory. The secret of the Hengduan mountain range seemed to be right in front of him. If not for this huge gamble that involved almost all of Lin Yuan's assets, he would have definitely tested the waters of the Hengduan mountain range. Suddenly, Lin Yuan's movements paused, and a glint flashed across his eyes. He felt as if his soul was blessed. These demon ancestors in the Hengduan mountain range did not seem to care about who was the Beast Master. Or rather, they did not care about the reason for these battles. They only did the right thing at the right time and maintained absolute neutrality. This was just like a preset program. System, use the power of incense. I want to look up all the information about the Hengduan mountain range. I want as much as you can. When Lin Yuan's voice fell, more than 50,000 points of incense were deducted from the interface. Correspondingly, a huge flow of information suddenly surged into Lin Yuan's sea of consciousness. Even though his sea of consciousness was incomparably tough, he could not help but feel waves of headache. After all, although the system was like a Russian doll, the things exchanged with real money were most likely not a scam. From the beginning of the Hengduan mountain range's habitat until now, everything that happened appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. He did not even need to flip through the information. He only needed to think and he could outline a large amount of related information. It was as if, He was the one who experienced all of this personally. Chapter 1066. Of course, although the system was powerful, it was not omnipotent. The information that it fed back to Lin Yuan was basically the content that appeared in official history, unofficial history, or gossip. It did not matter if the information was buried in the river of history, as long as it did appear, it would be found by the system. After filtering through the data, it would eliminate the obviously fabricated information, and send the information that was more than 60% authentic to Lin Yuan. As for the things that were not recorded, it could not be said that the system could not find them, but it was certain that with the system's current power, if it directly flipped through the river of time to see what happened in the Hengduan mountain range in the past, no matter if it was the system or Lin Yuan, they would have to pay an unbearable price. Interesting. After connecting several things together, the doubt in Lin Yuan's eyes eased slightly. As expected, there was no lack of talented people in this world. However, aptitude, shrewdness, and methods could only change a small situation. When faced with the real wheel of history, the influence that a person or a group of people could exert was so weak that it was laughable. Just like the Great Qin that swept the world, it was not because of Ying Zheng, the Great Qin Emperor. Instead, it was because before Ying Zheng, the Great Qin Empire had 6 generations of wise emperors. They turned the Qin clan, which was not much better than the barbarians, into the Qin Empire. It was also because of the accumulation of power from generation to generation that Ying Zheng was able to conquer the 6 nations. If it were not for the accumulation of the wise emperors of the Great Qin Empire, no matter how powerful Ying Zheng was, he would not be able to summon troops and provisions out of nothing to conquer the 6 nations. Similarly, the situation in the Hengduan mountain range was actually the same. The Hengduan mountain range occupied the center of the Tianwu continent. All the monsters that lived here in the past were used by the 7 great empires as a great wall of flesh and blood to stop the invasion of the enemy countries. They were the target of the nobles to prove their bravery, and were the means used by the demon slayers, mercenaries, and wanderers to make a living. It was obvious that their status was low. However, when the Beast Lord Kirin was fighting, the Hengduan mountain range was not. Back then, none of the 7 empires dared to provoke the Beast Lord Kirin. Otherwise, they would face a disaster in the blink of an eye. Later on, the 7 empires worked together and barely managed to suppress the Hengduan mountain range. It was also because of the alliance of the 7 empires that the ambitious Beast Lord Kirin had no choice but to indulge himself in pleasure. He no longer acted like a ruthless hero. However, the Beast Lord Kirin's disguise did not cause the 7 empires to let down their guard. Instead, it allowed the various clans in the Hengduan mountain range to take advantage of the situation and slowly take over the Monster King court. So it's like this. Reading up to this point, Lin Yuan could not help but murmur. Actually, he had always been curious. When the Beast Lord Kirin was young, he was definitely considered a ruthless hero. After all, he was able to lead the Hengduan mountain range, which was not strong at that time, to suppress the 7 great empires. Even Lei Qiusheng, a ruthless person who usurped the country, had no choice but to compromise and let go of the Jiao clan's remnants. Perhaps only Lei Qiusheng himself knew how much trouble it would bring him if he did not kill them all. However, the Beast Lord Kirin was basically mediocre in his later years. He was always in seclusion in the Monster King court, and even came up with the title of the strongest in the desolate monster realm. However, in reality, he did not break through. On the outside, there were the 7 great empires suppressing him. On the inside, there were the various clans that were expanding day by day. With such a situation, no wonder you would not care about it. No wonder you would set up such a trap. The confusion in Lin Yuan's eyes disappeared, leaving behind only relief. The Beast Lord Kirin actually thought highly of Lin Yuan as the next Beast Lord, because he saw some special qualities in Lin Yuan. He believed that the Monster King court would become stronger day by day under Lin Yuan's leadership. Although he might not be able to take back the authority of the Sky Martial world, he definitely would not be like now, where he would be kept in the Hengduan mountain range as a meat wall and prey. However, there were still some Monster King clans who were happy and content with their current lives. This time, in the election for the new Beast Lord, Most of the monster kings did not want to be the beast lord themselves. It was just that they did not want Lin Yuan to take over the position. They had to admit that Lin Yuan was a very ambitious and capable existence. He would definitely be able to lead the monster king court to greater glory. But the problem was that the 7 great empires had joined hands because of the pressure brought by the beast lord Kirin. If the even more terrifying Black Jiao took over the position of beast lord, it would only cause a war to break out. Even if the Hengduan mountain range could win, most of the monster kings would not be able to live to see that day. So, this world, Lin Yuan sighed. Even the false divinity realm cultivators and monster kings stopped here. They were unwilling to take half a step out of the safe sky martial world. They did not think that this world would be able to repair itself. At that time, they would lose everything they cared about. From the mortals to the low-level cultivators and monster kings, although there was a large amount of war on the surface, other than Lin Yuan, all of them were just trying to deplete each other's population. Not to mention the extermination of a country or clan, even the ownership of a border region was a matter of negotiation. Compared to war, it was more like a formality. This world was indeed very deformed. A person who did not seek to improve himself would at most cripple himself. But a group of people who had reached the peak would no longer seek to improve themselves. They would even drag the whole world down with them and let everything become a foregone conclusion. This would create such a deformed world. After understanding the mentality of the monster kings in the Hengduan mountain range, Lin Yuan took a deep breath and looked at the endless mountain range in front of him. For a moment, his feelings were somewhat complicated. If the information given by the system was really reliable, then Lin Yuan had made a mistake from the beginning. In the Hengduan mountain range, there was really only the strongest in the desolate demon realm. There was no existence that had stepped into the false divinity realm. There might not even be a demigod. The reason why the Heavenly Gate Guardians were afraid of this place was because countless years ago, many powerful monster kings were unwilling to see the monster kings being forced by humans to the point where they were deprived of even the last bit of land to survive. So, they gave up on reincarnation and buried their flesh and bones in a special way in this mountain range. After that, they formed an almost unbreakable formation. Only monster kings with the corresponding bloodline who held the artifacts left behind by their ancestors could activate this formation that enveloped the entire Hengduan mountain range. They could summon the spirits of their ancestors to eliminate all external enemies for the Hengduan mountain range. Now, the artifacts that activated the formation had long been destroyed, but the formation had given birth to its own intelligence. According to the thoughts of the monster kings who set up the formation, it had become the guardian of the Hengduan mountain range. Therefore, there was not a single false divinity in the Hengduan mountain range, but it could be said that there were countless false divinities. Chapter 1067. After all, other than the bloody law of the jungle, the demonic beasts mainly paid attention to the clan's glory and bloodline inheritance. These demonic beast clans living in the Hengduan mountains piously prayed for the protection of their ancestors every day, hoping that they or their descendants would not disgrace the glory left behind by their ancestors. Such emotions, in Lin Yuan's view, were simply a huge mine of incense power. And under such a huge amount of incense power, how much incense power had the formation spirit stored? It had probably reached a number that Lin Yuan did not even dare to think about. That was to say, this formation spirit had not been completed yet. Otherwise, this formation spirit would immediately be able to manifest its own body and become a saint-like existence. Therefore, the formation spirit was not an absolutely neutral existence. Its neutrality was only directed at the demonic beasts. After all, obsession was a very terrifying existence. Unless one achieved the freedom of the primordial chaos deluo, even a sage of the Great Path would receive the impression of obsession. The formation spirit's obsession was to protect the reproduction of the demonic beasts in the Hengduan mountains. This was the original intention of the formation, and now it was related to its own interest. All troops stop. Lin Yuan, who was covered in cold sweat, suddenly issued an order in the command channel. Even if the formation spirit was at the level of a fake god, or even a being that could surpass a fake god and become a sage of the Great Path at any time, its spiritual wisdom was still not much. After all, other than being born stupid, what could really determine a person's wisdom was not IQ itself, but various life experiences. Therefore, demonic beasts in the wisdom state had the same wisdom as humans, but each had its own personality. The wisdom of a spirit array was not inferior to that of a human, but the most fatal part was that it did not have much experience in the world. It did not understand most of the things in the world, and when it encountered something it did not understand, it would choose the simplest way to solve it, as usual. Lin Yuan entering the Hengduan Mountains could be interpreted in many ways. Intelligent creatures often only saw what they wanted to see. For example, the various dynasties were looking forward to the northern frontier falling out with the Hengduan Mountains. It was not that they wanted to rope in Lin Yuan, but that they did not want the northern frontier to continue to grow. However, the clans in the Hengduan Mountains felt that Lin Yuan had ordered the troops to enter the Hengduan Mountains at this time not to fall out with them, but to compete for the position of the Beast Master. Then, in the eyes of the formation spirit, what did Lin Yuan and the Northern Frontier Army's behavior at this moment look like? Lin Yuan could not figure this out, so he could only keep silent. This was because when the formation spirit did not understand Lin Yuan's thoughts, it would easily treat Lin Yuan and the Northern Frontier Army as foreign invaders. Naturally, it would stand on the side of the monsters in the Hengduan Mountains. In the face of a pseudo-god with almost endless incense power, Lin Yuan said that he really couldn't bear it. Even if he was a cheater, he had to pay attention to the basic law. In the case that the incense power reserve was far less than the array spirit, how could he bare his teeth in front of it? Lin Yuan was very clear that there was no reason to talk to the program. It was like when you downloaded some files on your computer, the antivirus software installed on your computer would immediately determine that it was a virus and completely delete it without even asking. What could you do then? Could you not only forgive it with a smile? There were two ways to solve this problem. The first was to directly shut down the antivirus software to download and run it. The second was to find a way to install a protective layer on the files that were determined to be viruses so that the antivirus software would not be able to determine that it was a virus. The same principle applied to Lin Yuan. He had no way to directly shut down the formation, nor could he block the formation spirit's perception of the outside world. Therefore, he could only stop the act of attacking the monster kings caught by force and temporarily let the formation spirit's judgment of his own judgment. At the very least, he had to first prove that he was not a virus file, right? When Lin Yuan's actions fell into the eyes of the leaders of the clans near the monster king's court, it was a completely different scene. The Northern Frontier Army, which had been unstoppable all the way, had killed countless monsters. Just as they were about to reach the Monster King's court and start a decisive battle with them, they suddenly stopped. They did not move forward nor did they set up camp. It looked as if they were waiting for orders. But there was no sign. The flying monsters they sent out did not see the structure of the command system of the Northern Frontier Army at all. They only saw the huge army suddenly stop. From the commander Li Zhongsheng to the most ordinary soldiers, even if the messenger ran fast, it was impossible to silently let the entire army know of an order in an instant, right? Strange. Too strange. This army was completely illogical. Half an hour later, in the night, a red horse broke through the darkness. The rider on the horse did not hold any weapons, as if the huge monster tied in front of him was nothing. In the blink of an eye, he rushed into the monster tide which was formed by monsters at least in the late stage of the wisdom realm. The rider cleared his throat and said loudly, "Who is in charge of the Hengduan mountain range now?" "My Dragon King invites you to come." His loud and clear voice echoed in the night. The leaders of the clans looked at each other and did not know how to respond. After all, the Black Jiao did not care about the various defense lines of the northern frontier and led so many people into the Hengduan mountain range. It did not seem like he wanted to have a good talk with them. In addition, the Black Jiao's record of killing 2 monster kings was too terrifying. For a group of monsters of the desolate monster realm, going out to face Lin Yuan directly was no different than gambling with their lives. Once Lin Yuan had evil thoughts, they would die in an instant. Everyone came out to fight for the position of Monster King, but until now, there was no definite result. Every clan had their own experts. Their words carried weight in their own land, but in the Monster King court, where the big shots gathered, no Monster King dared to say that he could be the master of the Hungduan mountain range at this time, unless it was the Monster King Kirin or the 3 Monster Kings in the past. But not to talk. Although the beast tied under the Monster Beast King court was strong, it was the military strength of the various clans. Every beast could be said to be the mainstay of the various clans. There were even some small and medium-sized clans who were the clan leaders and the like. They gathered here to wait for the arrival of the war because they had no other choice. But now, the Black Jiao wanted to talk with their leaders before the war. God knows how many monster beasts sighed in relief and hoped that this matter could be resolved peacefully. If they refused, the Black Jiao would not even need to make a move. The monster beasts under their command would tear them apart alive. Our Dragon King said that he will only give you 3 breaths of time. After 3 breaths, if you are not willing to talk outside, then we will attack directly. The red horse rider stood among the countless monster beasts and said arrogantly, "After all, the position of Monster King belongs to our Dragon King." Chapter 1068. On the other side. Lin Yuan coiled up his flood dragon body and stood in front of the Northern Frontier Army. His eyes were cold and gloomy. It was hard to say what the attitude of the clans in the Hungduan mountain range was, but what was certain was that the Monster Beast Palace was indeed in a state of disunity. If it wasn't for the pressure brought by the Northern Frontier Army, they probably wouldn't have joined hands at all. With the previous battle record of killing the 2 Monster Kings, and the first impression of a massacre as soon as they entered the Hungduan mountain range, those clans probably wouldn't easily come out to communicate with Lin Yuan, not to mention that Lin Yuan had given them 3 breaths of time. Therefore, these clan leaders didn't have the opportunity to cut off their interests and fight with force. They had to choose a suitable clan leader to communicate with Lin Yuan in the shortest time possible. And this unlucky guy who was pushed out would undoubtedly be the weakest, the most miserable, and the least popular one. Then the question was, who was more suitable than this unlucky guy to be the Monster King? The game of psychological warfare had always been like this. Every gamer would constantly look for advantages in words and actions to make the situation go in a direction that was beneficial to them. Lin Yuan didn't have the slightest intention of playing a game with the Hungduan mountain range monster beast clans. He directly expressed his attitude through some psychological hints. It was as if he was choking the necks of these clan leaders, forcing them to push out this unlucky guy. The 3 breaths of time hadn't passed, only 2 breaths of time. A white wolf the size of a calf walked out with the young general sent out by Li Zhongsheng. The wolf's face was full of helplessness. It followed behind the young general step by step, as if it was afraid that it would be killed by Lin Yuan halfway. It was obviously very reasonable for it to have this kind of concern. After all, killing the commander of the other side in front of the 2 armies was indeed a very demoralizing act. For Lin Yuan, who paid attention to results and was unscrupulous, this was a very reasonable behavior. "You are?" Lin Yuan stared at the white wolf in front of him and asked indifferently. The white wolf paused, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and said in a deep voice, "I am the clan leader of the Silver Moon clan. You can call me Yin Lei. In front of a great monster like you, I don't deserve to be called you." Silver Moon clan? Lin Yuan pondered for a moment. This clan wasn't a nameless clan, but in the Hungduan mountain range, the Silver Moon clan situation wasn't good. Including Yin Lei, the Silver Moon clan has a total of 4 desolate monster realm cultivators. It can be regarded as a standard mid-sized clan in the upper reaches. Lin Yuan has also heard of Yin Lei himself. He is a capable general under the command of Lei Meng, the Honed Ice Wolf King. He has a fierce reputation for fighting against the armies of human dynasties more than once. He has killed millions of people, and countless monsters have died in his hand. But the problem was that Yin Lei wasn't a clan leader who had a say in the depths of the Hungduan mountain range. His clan was a branch of the Honed Ice Wolf clan. Even if they had 4 members of the Desolate Demon Realm, the Silver Moon clan could only be assigned to the periphery of the Hungduan mountain range to protect the royal court. This was the unspoken rule of the Hungduan mountain range. Only the true descendants were qualified to live in the Hungduan mountain range. Or they could simply leave the clan and enter the Hungduan mountain range alone. The Silver Moon clan's situation wasn't good recently. It was mainly because the three Beast Kings and Kirin were the losers in the previous incident. As Lei Meng's right-hand man, it would be strange if Yin Lei had a good time in the Hungduan mountain range. If it wasn't for the Silver Moon clan's rich experience in fighting against human armies and the fact that they weren't in the depths of the Hungduan mountain range, they would have been wiped out by the other clans that participated in the killing of Kirin. The only exception to Lin Yuan was that Yin Lei would appear in the group that resisted him. After all, he was on the same side as Kirin and the three Beast Kings. After that incident, even if the remnants of the royal court didn't go to the Stonetalan forest, they definitely wouldn't appear here now. Such an action was no different from a traitor. Seeing Lin Yuan's strange gaze, Yin Lei licked his sweaty nose and said in a low voice, "I know you feel that I betrayed the Wolf King, but I have no choice. I'm different from the other clans. When that incident happened, my clansmen and I were still fighting against the humans on the Frost Mirror grassland. We didn't have the chance to retreat to the Stonetalan forest or other places. Also, when I returned to the clan, all the females and cubs in the clan had been captured by them. As he spoke, Yin Lei's gaze was filled with hatred and resentment. After all, as a member of the Hungduan Mountains, it had never retreated in the face of the armies of the human dynasties countless times. However, after a battle, it had inexplicably become a criminal of the Hungduan Mountains. All the females and cubs in the clan had been taken away. The brother clans that it trusted had either been wiped out or evacuated. The brothers around it were either dead or injured. There was no way for them to resist at all. They even had to work for these monster clans that had persecuted its own people. It would be strange if he didn't have any resentment. This king is not interested in your story. No matter what the reason is a traitor, and this king hates traitors the most. However, this king can see that the resentment and hatred in your eyes are not fake. Then I'll say it directly. I will help you ascend to the position of Beast Master, and I will also help you save the cubs of your clan. As long as you do as I say, I can guarantee that the clans you hate will pay 10 times, 100 times the price. However, in return, all the traitors will die, including you. Lin Yuan stared at Yin Lei and said in a low voice, "However, this king can guarantee that your Silver Moon clan can continue to reproduce for Raymond's sake. In the future, you will only become stronger. How about it?" Death wasn't the end of everything for a desolate demon realm expert. Just like the fire Kirin, even if it had been dead for hundreds of years, it could still revive itself through a series of methods. As for the other desolate demon realm experts, as long as they could pay the corresponding price, they could naturally reverse life and death. Yin Lei nodded heavily without any hesitation and said in a low voice, "Dragon King, please give your orders." This subordinate is willing to serve Lord Dragon King. As he blurted out, he realized that he didn't have the qualifications to become Black Jiao's subordinate. However, it didn't matter. As long as he could ensure the reproduction of his clan and take revenge on those disgusting fellows, it was fine. Since he had already reached this stage, what else could he not bet on? Chapter 1069. After nearly an hour, Yin Lei finally walked out of the Northern Frontier Army's encampment. During this 2-hour confrontation, the Northern Frontier Army was like a statue. Even though they were wearing heavy armor, they didn't sway in the slightest. Their eyes were fixed on the beast tied in front of them. Obviously, as long as Lin Yuan gave the order, these Northern Frontier Army would directly rush out and kill. On the contrary, the beasts of the Hungduan mountain range were much more disorganized and undisciplined. At the beginning of the confrontation, they were still able to maintain an aggressive appearance. However, as time went on, these beasts couldn't hold it in anymore. Not only did they rest in groups of 2 or 3, but they also whispered to each other and discussed the Northern Frontier Army's attack on the Hungduan mountain range. Even the monstrous beasts of the Stoneclaw forest seemed to be more elite than these so-called great monstrous beast. When he returned to the encampment of the Hungduan mountain range beasts, Yin Lei was obviously not as frightened as he was when he first came. Instead, a group of great beasts stood at the top of the encampment, looking at Yin Lei, who was running towards the encampment with a nervous expression. The Northern Frontier Army was really too strong. Coupled with the importance of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to the Hungduan mountain range, there really weren't many beasts who were willing to completely fall out with Lin Yuan if it wasn't necessary. Of course, the prerequisite was that Lin Yuan was willing to give up the position of Beast Master. Otherwise, there was no need to talk about any other conditions. When Yin Lei stepped into the encampment of the beasts, a group of great beasts surrounded him and clamored. The joys and sorrows of demonic beasts were not the same. Yin Lei only felt that they were noisy. After a while, Yin Lei cleared his throat and gestured for the other demonic beasts to quieten down. He then said, "The Black Jiao told me that he is not interested in the position of the Beast Master in the Hungduan Mountains. However, the northern frontier has been suffering heavy casualties in the Hungduan Mountains. This time, he came here with the intention of denouncing us. However, when we approached the Stoneclaw Forest, the northern frontier troops were attacked by the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers. After that, many of the beast tides were attacked by the Jiu poison. Hence, the Black Jiao came here mainly to question us if we intend to join forces with the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness to deal with the northern frontier." As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding beast kings looked at each other. During this period of time, they did not care about the matters in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains. After all the clans were busy fighting for the position of Beast Master. Who had the time to care about how many people came to the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains and how many people died? Anyway, as long as the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was still operating as usual, it was good news for the demonic beasts in the Hungduan Mountains. However, who would have thought that the men deployed by the northern frontier in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains had been secretly targeted by the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness? Who would have thought that if the Black Jiao did not come here personally, he would not have discovered that the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness had joined forces? Then, this blame would have been placed on their heads. Injustice. Too much injustice. The beast kings in the Hungduan Mountains could guarantee that they did not participate in any operations against the northern frontier. However, they had to bear the blame. The worst thing was that they could not defend themselves now. How were they going to explain to the Black Jiao? Were they going to say that they were busy electing the new Beast Master and did not pay attention to the matters in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains? Even if they were shameless enough to say that, the Black Jiao might not believe them. There were so many beast kings in the Hungduan Mountains. Even if one or two of them did not have the time to pay attention to the periphery, could it be that all the spies of the clans had died? So many lives in the northern frontier were lost in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains, and they did not even report it. For a moment, these beast kings were all deep in thought. Some of them looked at the beast kings around them, as if they were thinking about whether these beast kings could have really joined forces with the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness. After all, even if it was not to deal with the northern frontier, but to fight for the position of Beast Master, it was better to have external help than to face it alone. They borrowed the power of the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness to increase their prestige. Then, on the other hand, did the other two parties also borrow their influence in the Hungduan Mountains to block some news from reaching the king's palace? Other than these demonic beasts who were scheming, the other demonic beasts were the more hot-tempered type. Their first reaction was to grab their weapons and directly head towards the southern wilderness and the Yun Nation's empire. After all, they had not done this before. However, now that the Black Jiao had come to take revenge, they would be the ones to suffer the consequences. After this war, although the final battle in the Monster Palace had not started, the losses were shared among the various clans. On average, 1 to 3 branches of each clan would be wiped out by the northern frontier. Beast Kings, calm down, calm down. Yin Lei stuck out his tongue and licked his nose. His eyes were a little gloomy as he continued, "I have already talked to the Black Jiao. During this period of time, we have indeed neglected the movements in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains. This is our fault, but we have not done anything. However, The Black Jiao's attitude is very clear now. Either we continue to fight, or we send troops to attack the Frost Mirror grassland. As soon as he finished speaking, the beast kings around him fell silent. What kind of plan was this? The Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness joined forces to deal with the northern frontier and even put the blame on the Hengduan Mountains. In the end, after the Black Jiao took revenge on the Hengduan Mountains, he did not go after the Yun Nation and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness. He did not intend to let the Hengduan Mountains take revenge either. Instead, he pointed his gun at the Shuangjian dynasty. Did the Frost Mirror people eat your rice? What does this have to do with the Shuangjian dynasty? The Black Jiao said that although the Hengduan Mountains is powerful, other than the northern frontier, there are still 6 other empires outside. Especially after the recent series of events, the higher-ups of the northern frontier have raised a lot of doubts about whether they still want to maintain a friendly relationship with the Hengduan Mountains. Therefore, we have to express our stance on this matter. We have to use our identity as the Northern Frontier's ally to do something for the Northern Frontier. Otherwise, even with the Black Jiao's existence, the Northern Frontier might not continue to maintain a relationship with us. Putting aside the fact that the Northern Frontier has joined forces with the other 6 empires to continue blocking the Hengduan Mountains, just cancelling the deal between us and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce isn't something that the Beast Kings can handle, right? However, the Yun Nation is one of the 6 empires after all. The Black Jiao only realized that we might not be the culprit after being ambushed by them in the Hengduan Mountains. However, there's no actual evidence. If we attack the Yun Nation, the other 5 empires will definitely join forces with us. Chapter 1070. Thus, Black Jiao's intention is for us to attack the 6 empires in the name of launching a monster attack and focus on the barbarians in the Frost Mirror grassland. After all, their main forces are now at the northern frontier. If we attack the Frost Mirror grassland now, we can easily kill a large number of Shuangjian barbarian and force the Frost Mirror grassland to reinforce them. When that happens, the pressure on the northern frontier army will be greatly reduced, and they will naturally be free to deal with the Chuyun Empire and the Southern Wasteland Demon Venerable. This is also something that we can do from the perspective of an ally. After all, there are monster attacks every year. Isn't it up to us to decide when they will happen? Even if the Heavenly Gates Guardians want to investigate this matter, it will be very difficult for them to find trouble with us as long as they don't fall out with us. Yin Lei's mouth gradually widened as he said in a clear voice, "This is Black Jiao's intention." I also agree. It depends on what the Beast Kings think. What would they think? Of course, they agreed. The Beast Kings in the Hengduan Mountains were not willing to fall out with Black Jiao. They did not allow Black Jiao to succeed as the Beast King because they were worried that the northern frontier would become even more powerful and attract the joint attack of the 6 empires. Now, they did not fight with the northern frontier and could even curry favor with the northern frontier from the perspective of an ally. Furthermore, they did not have to bear any responsibility. Why would they not do such a good thing? Furthermore, how many monsters died in the periphery of the Hengduan Mountains? What did it have to do with them? On the contrary, if they fought with Black Jiao in front of the Monster King Palace today, the Beast Kings from large clans might not suffer any losses, but most of the great monsters under them would die. After all, the Northern Frontier Army's crazy fighting style was obvious to all. They were simply a bunch of lunatics. Who had ever seen a regular human army fight with monsters? Kicking and hitting them? Even when they lost their weapons, they directly used their mouths to bite them. Weren't they more monsters than monsters? If that's the case, we have no objections. A shriveled and aged Beast King raised his head and said in a trembling voice, "But, little cub, are you sure that Black Jiao is telling the truth? That it's only here because of the deaths in the Hengduan Mountains of the northern frontier, and that it's not interested in the position of Beast King at all?" Yin Lei pondered for a moment, and then said thoughtfully, "I think it's believable. That Black Jiao is an outsider after all, and Kirin was already severely injured when he escaped. I'm afraid he hasn't woken up yet. Otherwise, he would have definitely entered the Hengduan mountain range with the Black Jiao. Therefore, There's an 80% chance that the Black Jiao doesn't know what the position of Beastmaster entails. At this point, he paused and added, even if the Black Jiao is interested in the position of Beast King, it's probably too busy right now, right? The Sky Demon is still in the Central Plains and the south, and the Shuangjian dynasty is attacking the northern frontier. The Chuyun dynasty and the Demon Venerable of the southern wilderness are obviously hostile to the Black Jiao. If it starts a war with us now, isn't it seeking its own death? The current northern frontier only occupied 1/3 of the Shunwu dynasty's territory, and its total population was less than 1/3 of the Shunwu dynasty's. When the Shunwu dynasty faced the Shuangjian dynasty, the Qingjiang dynasty, the Endless Sea, and the Hengduan Mountains, they were beaten back repeatedly. Although they no longer had the Endless Sea Cucumber, they had the Sky Demon, the Chuyun dynasty, and the Demon Venerable of the southern wilderness. It could be said that once the northern frontier fell out with the Hengduan Mountains, it would not take long for it to completely collapse. No one would doubt that the northern frontier would dare to fall out with the Hengduan Mountains at this time, especially the Beast Kings. After all, this was a common problem among intelligent creatures. Even if they knew that sometimes what they saw might not be the truth, they were still willing to believe what they saw. Since no one objects, it means this matter is feasible. Yin Lei looked around at the Beast Kings and said in a deep voice, "The matter of attacking the Frost Mirror grassland is settled. Our Silver Moon clan has fought with the Shuangjian dynasty more than once, so I can take the lead in this matter. However, I have to remind everyone that the Black Jiao will definitely not let this matter go easily. Everyone must show their attitude, otherwise," he did not finish his sentence, but all the Beast Kings knew that the Black Jiao was never a person who was willing to suffer losses. The Hengduan Mountains followed closely behind the Black Jiao. At this point, it was obviously impossible to make the Black Jiao leave just by talking, other than the Beast Kings who were discussing animatedly. In the center of the northern frontiers military formation, Li Zhongsheng and the other mid-level and high-level descended demons were standing beside Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's blue-white eyes flashed coldly. He murmured, "I have been thinking about why a Beast King position with no deterrence would attract so many beast clans to fight for it. Previously, I thought they wanted a name to conquer other beast clans. Later, I thought they simply did not want me to be the Beast King. I did not expect the truth to be like this." Previously, Yin Lei had told him that the Hengduan Mountains had its own soul. Once he became the new Beast Master of the Hengduan Mountains, he would be able to communicate with the soul of the mountain range. When necessary, he could even move mountains and fill seas, changing the terrain of the Hengduan Mountains as he wished. From Lin Yuan's point of view, the Hengduan Mountains naturally did not have a spirit. This also meant that the mountain spirit that Yin Lei mentioned was most likely the array spirit of the Great Formation. After becoming the Beast King of the Hengduan Mountains, he could communicate with the array spirit and even mobilize part of the power of the Great Formation. This Beast King position did not seem to be just for show. It was no wonder that the Beast King Kirin could fight with Xu Yang, Lei Fan, and the others with the cultivation of the desolate demon realm. He could even withstand the pressure from the Inferno demon beasts. If it was not for the Beast Kings of the Hengduan Mountains stabbing him in the back, it would be hard to say who would win. If that was the case, he could not hand over the Beast King position so easily. No one could estimate how much incense power the array spirit had accumulated. Other than the Beast King Kirin, no one else knew how much power the Beast King could mobilize from the array spirit. Could Yin Lei really be trusted? Lin Yuan's eyes flashed coldly. He said indifferently in the command system, "Contact the members of the Association of the Demon Emperor immediately. Mobilize all our spies scattered in the Hengduan Mountains. I want to know where the cubs and females of the Silver Moon clan have been captured in the shortest time possible. Even among the demon beasts from the northern frontier, other than Batu, how many of them were truly trustworthy?" Yin Lei, who had turned to the enemy, was obviously not worthy of Lin Yuan's full trust. Therefore, it was necessary to take some precautions. Chapter 1071. The Black Jiao led the Northern Frontiers Army into the Hengduan mountain range. Not long after, a strange energy enveloped the area from the Stoneclaw Forest to the Monster King Court. No one knew what happened in the Hungduan mountain range. After all, other than the experts who had touched the false god realm, ordinary people did not even have the qualifications to explore the Hungduan mountain range. Those false gods needed to rely on the power of incense to prolong their lives, so they would not waste it in such a place. Estimating the time, the Northern Frontiers army should have almost reached the Monster King court. The energy that enveloped the Hungduan mountain range suddenly dissipated. All the experts looked over curiously, but when they took a closer look, many of their faces turned green. There were no corpses everywhere, and there was not even a single injured person. The Hungduan mountain range's monsters were only confronting the northern frontier. The Northern Frontiers army was also not as arrogant as they were at the beginning. They even began to slowly retreat. It was obvious that the conflict between the northern frontier and the Hungduan mountain range had not developed to the point of life and death. Either the Black Jiao or the Hungduan mountain range had proposed a reconciliation. Furthermore, both sides had reached an agreement under some unknown conditions. However, no matter what the Hungduan mountain range agreed to the Northern Frontiers conditions, it was not good news for the six great empires or the Southern Wasteland's monster kings. The Northern Frontier did not lose too many people in the Hungduan mountain range. Especially after the demi-human tribes and the armed monsters were mixed in, the Northern Frontiers' military strength could be said to have decreased instead of increased. If it were not for the fact that the empires had been passed down for countless years and had many families, sects, and other private armies, the Northern Frontiers' military strength would probably be the strongest country in the Qianwu continent. But even so, it was clear who was stronger between the hundreds of thousands of elite troops that obeyed the orders of a single person and the tens of millions of troops that had a large number of voices in the command system. Now that the Northern Frontier had not suffered any heavy losses, what they had to do next was to attack the surrounding regions. It would have been fine if both sides had been at peace. No matter how strong the Northern Frontier was, they could not afford to offend the masses and attack the various dynasties. As such, they could only attack Sky Demon. However, the problem was that the Northern Frontier wasn't completely free from the six empires. Putting aside the fact that the Chuyun dynasty and the Demon Venerable of the Southern Wasteland were conspiring to encroach on the Hungduan mountain, the Shuangjin dynasty had deployed almost all of its available troops to attack the Northern Frontier. Since the Northern Frontier had already been decided to become the Seventh Dynasty, who would dare to send troops to attack the Northern Frontier when the Shuangjin dynasty was the first to stir up trouble? Even if they could come up with some excuses, who would dare to say that they could definitely defeat the army of the Northern Frontier? In fact, although the Shuangjin dynasty felt it, they were not particularly afraid. After all, the grasslands were their home ground. Even if the army of the Northern Frontier was incomparably valiant and did not lose to the demon beasts in field battles, the Shuangjin dynasty still dared to say that they could fight against the Northern Frontier in terms of mobility and tolerance to the grasslands environment. Even if they died, they could still bite off a piece of meat from the Northern Frontier. What they were truly afraid of was the Chuyun dynasty. The outside world had always thought that the Chuyun dynasty and the Southern Wasteland's demon beasts were enemies. Even their trump card army, the Chuyun tiger soldiers, was completely used to resist the Southern Wasteland's demon beasts. However, in the dark, the two deadly things, the Chuyun dynasty, had long been corrupted by the Chuyun dynasty. Even the previous emperor was addicted to the Chuyun dynasty and could not extricate himself from the Chuyun dynasty. This attempt to encroach on the Hungduan mountains was not because of the Chuyun dynasty's ambition, but because of the Southern Wasteland's demon venerables order. Originally, the dynasty was already in a difficult situation. Black Jiao's divine thunder almost wiped out the emperor and all the civil and military officials in the dynasty. In addition, the Southern Wasteland's demon beasts suddenly rebelled, which also caught the Chuyun dynasty unprepared. Losing the city and land was one thing, but the key was that the Chuyun dynasty's army that could fight almost all died in this incident. Moreover, although the Chuyun dynasty was located in the Great Swamp, the official system was very complete. There was a series of complete imperial examinations that recruited talents from aristocratic families and poor families. After these people passed the imperial examinations, they were not immediately appointed. Instead, according to their results, they were assigned to counties with different levels of wealth to assist them. Then, they would be promoted based on their personal achievements. Those outstanding talents could directly continue their studies in the imperial library built in the imperial city. At the same time, they could build up their qualifications and be prepared to fill the high positions in the imperial court. Therefore, Lin Yuan's divine thunder not only wiped out all the civil and military officials in the Chuyun dynasty, but even the reserve talents of the Chuyun dynasty were killed. Now, it was very difficult for the Chuyun dynasty to even maintain the livelihood of the people, let alone wage war. If the northern frontier attacked the Chuyun dynasty, they would probably be annihilated overnight. The new monarch of the Chuyun dynasty was not the direct descendant of the previous monarch. Instead, he was the son of a prince. After going through a series of procedures, he was adopted by the previous emperor to inherit the throne. After all, those outstanding princes were all killed by Lin Yuan when they were in the imperial court. They could not expect the remaining few hedonistic sons to inherit the throne, could they? And now, this new monarch felt as if there was a huge danger word hanging above his head. The beauties in his harem did not seem to be pretty anymore. The spiritual items produced from various places did not seem to be fragrant either. After all, he felt that he was only one step away from annihilation. How could he be in the mood to enjoy the luxuries that came with the power of a monarch? In the throne room of the Chuyun dynasty. If the northern frontier attacks our dynasty will be annihilated overnight. My beloved subjects, do you have any good ideas to resolve my worries? The young monarch of the Chuyun dynasty paced back and forth in front of the dragon throne. It was as if the golden chair behind him had thorns. After all, if he continued to be a prince, even if the Chuyun dynasty was annihilated, he could continue to be a rich young master by hiding his identity. He might even be able to find a job at the northern frontier and live out the rest of his life in comfort. But now, he was the monarch. The responsibility that came with this supreme position was extremely terrifying. For example, once the Chuyun dynasty was annihilated, all the civil and military officials in the dynasty, including the royal family, could hide their identities and seek refuge at the northern frontier. However, as the monarch, he had no choice but to die for the country. An old official with white hair and beard took a step toward the aisle in the middle of the throne room. He said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, how can there be any good ideas at this point? The plan now depends on your choice. Will you continue to be the enemy of the northern frontier or think of a way to make peace?" Make peace. Of course. The monarch of the Chuyun dynasty's expression changed. He said in a deep voice, "Old Prime Minister, please teach me what I should do to make peace with the northern frontier." Chapter 1072. 4 hours later. Li Zhong stood in the prince's residence with his hands behind his back. All of a sudden, he heard a shriek above his head. When he lifted his head, he happened to see a ferocious bird with black and white feathers circling above the prince's residence in the northern frontier. That's. Li Zhong glanced sideways as confusion flashed through his eyes. He could not sense any demonic chi from the bird at all, as if it was just an ordinary wild beast. However, the prince's residence in the northern frontier was where Lin Yuan often stayed, so the aura left there was extremely terrifying. Let alone ordinary wild beasts, even demonic beasts below wisdom state would avoid the prince's residence in the northern frontier. Moreover, this ferocious bird was clearly a foreign species. At the very least, he had never seen one before in the northern frontier. The cloud-piercing eagle from the Chuyun dynasty. Li Xin's voice suddenly came from behind. Without waiting for Li Zhongsheng to reply, Li Xin pursed his lips and imitated the bird's cry. Then, he slowly extended his left hand. At this moment, the bird flapped its wings and swooped down, landing on Li Xin's shoulder. After the cloud-piercing condor steadied itself, Li Xin reached out and removed the bamboo tube tied to the condor's leg. He poured out a roll of parchment from the tube. After skimming through the contents of the parchment, Li Xin smirked and revealed a mocking smile. The Chuyun dynasty is planning to make peace with us. They're even willing to give up Kangyun, Dingyun, and Shangyun counties. As long as our northern frontier doesn't target the Chuyun dynasty in the upcoming military operations, They're even willing to call themselves a subordinate nation and agree to all the decisions made by the northern frontier during the Seven Dynasties' Great Ceremony unconditionally. Li Zhong's eyelids twitched a little. The Seven Dynasties' Great Ceremony could be said to be a convention that had been in place ever since the Seven Dynasties were established. After all, the Seven Dynasties had settled down, and no one could really destroy the other. Therefore, when it came to territorial ownership or large-scale military conflicts, both sides would hold it in until the Seven Dynasties' Great Ceremony that was held once every 4 years. During the last Seven Dynasties' Grand Ceremony, the Shunwu dynasty was still one of the most powerful countries. No one knew what happened during the Grand Ceremony that day. However, not long after that, the 4 major powers joined hands to encircle and annihilate the Shunwu dynasty. As for the northern frontier, firstly, the territory of the Shunwu dynasty had not been completely recovered. Although it was designated as the 7th dynasty, it had not been officially established. The monarch and the title of the dynasty had not been decided yet. Only Li Zhong, who was a prince and not a monarch, existed. Besides, the 4-year deadline was not up yet. Therefore, no one mentioned this matter. Is the Chuyun dynasty certain that we won't attack them immediately, so they want to give us benefits to shut us up? Li Zhong did not look at the parchment. He only sneered and said, "This gift is not sincere at all. They said that they ceded 3 counties to us, but in order to take over these 3 counties, we have to go through the territory that the Southern Wilderness Demon Range took from them. Moreover, these 3 counties are the most vulnerable places that the Southern Wilderness Demon Range built in the Chuyun dynasty. Are they trying to divert the trouble so that we won't have time to take care of them when we fight with the Southern Wilderness Demon Range?" Li Xin was silent for a moment. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, "I have a suggestion. The letter says that the envoys of the Chuyun dynasty have set off and will arrive at the northern frontier in a few days. Why don't I borrow a group of demonic beasts from Lord Dragon King and kill them in the Southern Wilderness Demon Range's territory before they arrive?" When he spoke up to hear, he paused for a moment and added, "Now, the Chuyun Empire is extremely afraid of us. Once the peace talks fail, they'll definitely become alarmed. Moreover, once the diplomatic group sets off, they'll definitely bring along an official letter of credence. Once the diplomatic group is intercepted and killed, they'll definitely think that the demon vein of the southern wasteland has discovered this matter. In their panic, they might even suddenly dispatch troops and catch the demon vein of the southern wasteland off guard." Li Zhong frowned and pondered for a moment with his hands behind his back. Then, he slowly said, "Okay, but we don't have to kill them. We just have to appear on their path and pretend to be patrolling. When we discover them, we just have to chase them for a while." Although the demonic beasts of the southern wilderness mainly cultivated the art of Jiyu poison, it was impossible to distinguish the demonic beasts of the southern wilderness and the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range. A group of frightened demonic beasts. There was really no need for the northern frontier to put in the effort to plan. A little scare would achieve the goal. "Okay, then I'll do it right away." Li Xin nodded slightly and turned to disappear into the darkness. On the other side, Lin Yuan retreated with the troops of the northern frontier while listening to the information from the lieutenant of the embroidered uniform guard beside him. The demon emperor would use many spies buried in the Hengduan mountain range. Only then did he find out that Yin Lei was indeed like what he said. When the Hengduan mountain range changed, they were still fighting with the Frost Mirror Barbarian on the grassland. When they finished the battle and returned, the situation in the Hengduan mountain range was already settled. In addition, there were the females of the Silver Moon clan. All the cubs were taken away by the various clans, so they had to cooperate with the actions of the various clans. However, for the Silver Moon clan that was obviously not on the same boat, the rebels in the Hengduan mountain range would not treat them well. Almost everything was a loss, so they let the Silver Moon clan do it. The tributes they asked from the Silver Moon clan were increasing day by day. Even without Lin Yuan, Yin Lei would not be able to bear the pressure sooner or later and choose to fall out with the various demonic beast clans in the Hengduan mountain range. After all, if this continued, they would be annihilated sooner or later. However, the females and cubs of the Silver Moon clan were very difficult to deal with. This was because when the various clans threatened Yinlei, they almost killed most of the females of the Silver Moon clan. As for the cubs, although they barely survived, many of them were crippled. Especially the Silver Moon wolves that were about to reach adulthood. Without enough resources to support their advancement, it would be very difficult for them to awaken their spirits. Moreover, it was difficult for them to survive under the oppression of the various clans. When even having a full stomach was an extravagant hope, it was impossible for them to accumulate energy to awaken their spirit. Even if Lin Yuan wanted to rescue these Silver Moon wolves, it was actually quite difficult to do so. Just like how the position of the Beast Master in the Hengduan mountain range had not been decided, all the spoils of war were divided equally. Therefore, the cubs of the Silver Moon wolves could be said to be in almost every clan. However, each clan did not have many cubs. It was simply a fool's dream to rescue them. I hate not keeping my words. Lin Yuan's eyes were gloomy as he said in a deep voice, if we use all the spies of the Demonic Beast Emperors Association, can we save the cubs of the Silver Moon wolves to the greatest extent? I mean, those that are still worth saving. The embroidered uniform guard captain thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, although we have spies in every clan, but... Chapter 1073. However, the cubs of the Silver Moon Wolf clan are too scattered. Furthermore, because we don't share a border, we haven't come into contact with the Silver Moon Wolf clan before. We don't know if those Silver Moon Wolves are worth saving or if they can never be awakened. The embroidered uniform guard captain's eyes flashed as he said in a low voice, furthermore, several of our subordinates have said that the most important thing right now is to persuade the clans of the Hengduan mountain range to send troops to attack the Frost Mirror grassland. If you do these things now, I'm afraid you'll be disloyal and even ruin the plan. We'll also have to face the wrath of the clans of the Hengduan mountain range. Lin Yuan stopped, his black jiao tail slowly tapping the ground. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said slowly, first, I hate not keeping my word. Therefore, if I've promised something, even if it's as difficult as ascending to the heavens, I'll definitely do it, and I'll definitely do it. Second, we definitely can't count on the position of Beast Master in the Hengduan mountain range for the time being. However, this position is very important, so we can't just let anyone take it like we originally thought. However, I can think of a way to help Yinlei take the position. The prerequisite is that I have to be able to control it so that it won't dare to betray me. The embroidered uniform guard captain was also silent for a moment before he continued. However, the problem is that although the clans of the Hengduan mountain range often recruit demon beasts from the outside, they still value bloodlines. The spies we sent in can only pass on some information. They don't have much power. It'll be difficult to rescue so many Silver Moon wolf cubs. At this point, he paused and suddenly changed the topic. However, I feel that we don't have to use force. Dragon King, why don't you talk to the leaders of the clans and ask them to hand over the Silver Moon wolf cubs to us? I feel that you're already making a huge concession by not running for the position of Beast Master. If you only ask them to send troops to attack the Shuangjian dynasty, it'll be too easy for them. Lord Dragon King, there's a demon beast called Yinlei waiting for you ahead. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to reply, a scout spurred his horse to Lin Yuan's side. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and signaled for the scout to lead the way. Then, he turned his head to look at the embroidered uniform guard captain and said, in short, I will definitely accomplish this task. You guys can make a list of what channels to use. If you need anything, just let me know. Then, under the guidance of the scout, Lin Yuan soon saw Yinlei, who had separated from the Hengduan Mountains Beast Kings. Lord Dragon King, I've already passed on the message you wanted me to send. For now, these clans are clearly leaning towards attacking the Frost Mirror grassland instead of fighting you. Yinlei stood up straight, his eyes solemn. Yes, well done. Lin Yuan grinned, but it only lasted for a moment before he withdrew his smile and said, unfortunately, your task is not easy to handle. I've already sent people to investigate, but the situation is not optimistic. During the process of being threatened by the Silver Moon clan, in addition to those who resisted and were persecuted, almost all of the Silver Moon clan's females are dead. Many of your clan's cubs are also crippled. After all, they are in the spiritual awakening stage and were kidnapped by various clans. Not to mention preparing resources for spiritual awakening, even filling their stomachs is a problem. However, if you can save them, the resources of the northern frontier can make up for it. But Lin Yuan looked like he wanted to say something but stopped. Yin Lei's eyes were so red that they were about to burst. He looked like a ferocious beast that was about to devour a human. After all, the main reason why Yin Lei was forced to cooperate with the various clans in the Hengduan Mountains was because of the captured females and cubs. Although their combat power might be very low, they represented the reproduction and inheritance of a clan. Any clan leader would want to fight to the death if they heard that their females and cubs had ended up in such a state. The most troublesome thing now is that even if the cubs and females are lucky enough to survive, they are still imprisoned in various clans. If we try to rescue them by force, I'm afraid we won't be able to save many of them. Of course, I'll still try my best to do this and see if there are other ways to rescue these cubs as much as possible. However, we have to consider the worst-case scenario. Therefore, I'll get someone to make a list for you. You have to give me a list of the priority to rescue those cubs. Lin Yuan sighed and said, I know that making such a choice is actually a very cruel and painful thing for a clan leader, but there's no other way. Some things, sacrifice is also necessary. Yin Lei clenched his teeth, as if he was afraid that he would roar as soon as he opened his mouth. After a long while, Yin Lei finally calmed down. He turned his eyes and fixed his gaze on Lin Yuan's face. He made a deep sound from his throat and said with a voice that was almost squeezed out, You promised me before that you would make these clans pay a painful price. Do you still keep your promise? Yes. Lin Yuan didn't hesitate and responded directly. Because he knew that Yin Lei was going to be ruthless in the following period of time. Those abducted females and cubs were either dead or crippled. Even if they were lucky enough to be found, the Silver Moon clan, which had 4 desolate demon realm experts, would be reduced from a powerful clan in the Hengduan mountain range to a small clan that was not much better than the demon beasts in the demon beast forest. Many of their former enemies would even come forward to ruthlessly trample on them. If it's really impossible, then, don't rescue them. The killing intent in Yin Lei's eyes was almost tangible. He said in a hoarse voice, If it really comes to that, I'm willing to cooperate with all your actions. I only want a result. Those clans that participated in the plot against the Silver Moon clan will all be buried with my clan. Okay. Lin Yuan still didn't hesitate. No matter how one looked at it, Lin Yuan hated traitors very much. Even if these clans didn't betray him, after the Beastmaster Kirin was seriously injured and unconscious, these clans did stand on the opposite side of the northern frontier. Although they didn't directly act against the northern frontier, in fact, what these clans did shook the northern frontier quite a bit. Whether it was to take revenge or to clean up the Hengduan mountain range and lay the foundation for controlling the Hengduan mountain range, Lin Yuan had to destroy these clans. After all, if they could betray the Beastmaster Kirin now, who knew if they would betray him in the future? Looking at Yin Lei in front of him, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a chill on his back. The wolf is a very cruel, cunning, and intelligent animal. No matter if they were wild beasts or demon beasts, wolves were always enough to make experienced hunters tremble in fear. Chapter 1074. Most of the wolves would gather in packs and attach great importance to cooperation. When a wolf pack hunts with perfect cooperation, no matter if it was a herbivore or a majestic carnivore, it would be difficult for them to escape in the end. Especially when the number of wolves reached a certain scale, it was simply a nightmarish existence. However, the most dangerous wolf would always be a lone wolf, not a pack of wolves. This was because a lone wolf would not be able to hunt those large prey. Hunting those large prey would definitely result in injuries. Even the slightest injury would be fatal to a lone wolf. Furthermore, small prey would not be able to fill their stomachs. Therefore, they could only follow behind their target from afar and use all means to weaken their target, waiting for their target to reveal a flaw. Therefore, a lone wolf would definitely have enough patience to stare at every prey that it had set its eyes on and wait for the prey to reveal a fatal weakness. And now, Yin Lei was forced from a clan leader to a lone wolf by the various clans in the Hungduan mountain range. A lone wolf that wanted to drag those clans that had hurt him to the grave with him regardless of the cost. In a few days, I will send envoys into the Hungduan mountain range to communicate with the clan leaders. I will also make it clear that in this war against the Frost Mirror Grassland, which clan killed the most Shuangjian barbarian, I will support that person to become the new Beast King. Therefore, you can make some preparations in advance. I will also secretly send you some Shuangjian barbarian heads. In addition, those clan leaders think that they have grasped your weakness. Rather than continuing to argue endlessly, I think they will be more inclined to support you. After you become the new Beast Master of the Hungduan mountain range, I hope that you can be more stable. Don't think about revenge first, you have to try your best to get closer to the various clans and think of ways to provoke conflicts between them. When the time comes, I will enter the game again and ask for the cubs of your clan that they have imprisoned. They shouldn't have any more objections. After all the handover, it will be time for you and me to settle the score with them. Lin Yuan turned his head and looked in the direction of the Monster King court. He said in a deep voice, "This is the general plan. If there are any changes in the middle, I will think of a way to contact you. Is that okay?" "No problem. Then, I'll take my leave first." Yin Lei nodded. After a few ups and downs, he hid in the bushes on the side and gradually disappeared. At this moment, the captain of the embroidered uniform guard urged his horse closer to Lin Yuan and stared in the direction that Yin Lei had left in. He said in a low voice, "Sir Dragon King, this monster's emotions seem to be very unstable. Based on my personal advice, I feel that you shouldn't bet all your chips on it. The new Beast Master doesn't necessarily have to be supported." He paused and said in a low voice, "Supporting a member of one of the three Beast King factions, whether it's the Stoneclaw Forest under your command or the former Beast King Karin's subordinate, I think it's a good choice." "Okay, got it." Lin Yuan replied casually. "Lord Dragon King, you," the captain of the embroidered uniform guard took a deep breath and spoke again. However, Lin Yuan only glanced at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "I said, I got it. Do you understand?" "Yes." The captain of the embroidered uniform guard was interrupted by Lin Yuan. He could only straighten his back on the horse and reply in a deep voice. "On the Frost Mirror Grassland." The third prince looked in the direction of the Hungduan mountains with a gloomy face. It was as if water was about to drip out of his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "They're all a bunch of lunatics." When they heard the word plunder, it was like they were poisoned. They all rushed toward the northern frontier and couldn't be pulled back. Now that they've been stopped by the northern frontier outside the Great Wall, they're regretting it now. What were they doing earlier? The old Khan of the Shuiliao tribe had countless women in his lifetime, so naturally, he had many children as well. However, only the 13th prince, who was known as a fierce tiger, and the third prince, who was often referred to as the sly fox. Of course, in the old Khan's eyes, even his 13th brother, who was considered by countless people to be the next Frost Mirror Kargan, was nothing more than a brute with brawn but no brains. His 13th brother was a typical Frost Mirror man. He was barbaric and fierce. When his temper flared, he would disregard everything and drive his horse to smash all obstacles in front of him. He liked to plunder, hunt, and fight. Through these actions, he proved his excellence and showed his glory. However, like most Frost Mirror men, his 13th brother could be said to be the embodiment of both the wolf and the dog. When the wind was favorable, he could be the champion of three armies. When the wind was against him, he was like a stray dog. He never knew what it meant to feign defeat and turn the tables. It was just like how no one knew that the plundering of the northern frontier had always been encouraged by his 13th brother's hanger-on. That was why he had led a group of Shuiliao knights into the northern frontier before the main force had set out. It was just like how no one knew that the hanger-on who had encouraged the 13th prince to plunder the northern frontier in advance was a spy he had raised. Even if the 13th prince hadn't been stopped by the northern frontier, he would still have been killed by a cold knife behind his back. He was destined to never return to the grasslands. In the end, everything went smoother than he had expected. He had even thought about how to suppress the ambitious tribes through various means after he took over the throne, how to use other activities to suppress the Shuangjian dynasty's plundering of the borders every year, and how to start a good relationship with the other dynasties. In the end, he was just thinking about it. His father, who had lost the vision he had when he was young, still thought that he was a famous general who could dominate the world. Every day, he would go through a cycle of recalling the glory of the past. Again and again, he was more and more certain that the Yang Xingkai was in his hands back then. He had suffered a setback instead of being stabbed in the back by Lei Qiusheng. Therefore, his father still made that stupid decision. Attack the northern frontier? What would they use to attack the northern frontier? Ever since the northern frontier had reclaimed the north, they had always been fighting with the Sky Demon. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the northern frontier had always regarded the Shuangjian dynasty as a strong enemy. Even the Wei River defense line that faced the Sky Demon was not as expensive as the Great Wall of the northern frontier. It could even be said that from the day the Great Wall of the northern frontier was successfully built, the northern frontier had been waiting for the day the Frost Mirror cavalry would be beaten to a pulp by the Great Wall. He had thought that he wouldn't live to see that day in his lifetime. However, he hadn't expected that his father, the Sky Khan of the Grasslands, would really plunder the northern frontier again in order to confirm the 13th prince's life and death. Chapter 1075. Now, retribution had come. No matter what the northern frontier did next, the Frost Mirror Plains were destined to be unstable. This was especially true for the Bloodspan tribe. After making two decisions that had caused the other tribes of the plains to suffer heavy losses, they would soon be surrounded and attacked by all the other tribes, let alone continue to control the other tribes. The third prince turned his head and looked at the Blood Liao tribe in the distance, where smoke was rising in spirals. He sighed in his heart. Only then did he say to the group of knights who had set out with him and were carrying bags of various sizes, "Brothers, last night the wolf god entered my dream and warned me that a great disaster was about to befall the Frost Mirror Plains. We must leave the Frost Mirror Plains in order to survive. Today, we only have 28 riders, but in the future, when we return to the plains, we will still be able to move unhindered. At that time, all of you will become khans of your respective tribes. Let's go. Hurrah!" The Bloodspan knights behind the third prince all raised their scimitars and roared. These Bloodspan knights were not veterans who had served for many years. Those veterans had all set out with the old khans, but many of the reserves had remained in the Bloodspan tribe. The third prince had basically picked out the most outstanding of them, intending to use them as his subordinates when he went to other regions. Although these young Bloodspan knights did not know what had happened in the outside world, their talent was there, so none of them were fools. Thus, they all tacitly agreed not to ask the third prince why he had only brought them away and not the entire Bloodspan tribe, since he had already foreseen the disaster of the plains. From the moment they stepped out of the Bloodspan tribe, the people behind them had been abandoned. In the following operations, they would only be the scapegoats and protectors of this small group. The third prince sat on his tall warhorse, his eyes shining as he stared into the distance. He sternly said, "We'll go against the flow and go to the border of the Azure River Empire first. I'll have people set up all sorts of supplies there. Once we get there, we'll trim our hair and change our clothes. We'll disguise ourselves as a caravan and enter the Azure River Empire. We'll slowly accumulate strength and wait for an opportunity." A caravan? A Blood Liao knight was startled for a moment before whispering, "Third prince, can we disguise ourselves as something else? Besides you, everyone else in this group is a murderous martial artist. The soldiers at the checkpoint have sharp eyes and will be able to tell at a glance that we aren't ordinary. Isn't this plan a little too risky?" Due to the recent actions of the northern frontier, the Azure River Empire could be said to be in a state of panic. They constantly set up a large number of defensive fortifications near the Hengduan mountain range. Even the Wei River had to patrol several times a day to ensure that no one had infiltrated the Azure River Empire before they were willing to stop. Other than the leader who looked a little weak, the rest of the team was filled with killing intent. It was impossible to fool the eyes of the sentinels. "Guards! Have you ever seen a caravan that dares to hire guards like this? A gentlemanly young man was walking with the group while the rest of them were filled with murderous intent. If this was a normal caravan, they would rather spend more resources and hire more guards. After all, anything could happen on the trade route. Not to mention that guards would join hands with bandits to rob caravans, even guards would change their identities and return to do the same job. It was not uncommon in the commercial district of the various empires. It's fine. The third prince narrowed his eyes slightly and said, I've already prepared your identities. When the time comes, don't speak. As long as you don't expose our Frost Mirror tribe's accent, I guarantee that you can enter the Azure River Empire's territory. Moreover, we're only going to cross their border. We don't really plan to become merchants. At most, we'll just give them some benefits. The Blood Liao Knight who raised the question finally shut up and retreated, not daring to speak again. After all, the third prince's title of Sly Fox was not fake. Since he had already prepared in advance, he would naturally be fully prepared. He was only worried that the third prince had not thought of this, so he stood out to remind him. As for why they chose the Azure River Empire, it was because the Azure River Empire's geographical conditions were superior. It had a much larger area and production than the Cloud Empire. Even after the Demon Venerable took over the southern wilderness, the Azure River Empire's territory was much larger than the Cloud Empire's. In addition, the Azure River Empire's army's combat ability on land was indeed inferior. Not to mention these carefully selected Blood Liao Knights, even the regular army of the other empires would be able to beat the Azure River Empire on land. The 28 of them could be called the best horse bandits on the other side. Let's go. The third prince nodded slightly. His legs clamped tightly on the horse's belly, and he fiercely whipped the warhorse under him. Actually, he had a secret that even his biological father did not know. And that was, he was very strong. The third prince had never seriously fought with anyone because he was used to using his brain to solve problems. Over time, most of the Frost Mirror people believed that the third prince was a sickly invalid who couldn't even ride a horse. But in truth, this was only because of his special constitution. He had secretly tested himself, and no one at the same cultivation level could take 3 of his moves. He had done quite a few tests before, and finally came up with a more pertinent data. When he circulated his stellar energy, he was 9 to 15 times more efficient than other cultivators of the same cultivation level. However, his meridians were no different from those of ordinary people, so every time he attacked, he had to endure the pain of his meridians being torn apart. Without harming his body, he could only attack 3 times a day at most. No one knew that if his valiant 13th brother was within 7 steps of him, he could kill him with a single palm. Meanwhile, at the northern frontier, in the Bureau of Military Intelligence, Zhong Xiuzhu looked away from the war sandbox and turned to the embroidered uniform guard who had just entered. He questioned, "The 13th prince of your Bloodspan tribe has just left the Frost Mirror grassland with 27 Bloodspan cavalry reserves. They're heading south along the Wei River. It seems that they intend to cross the river and enter the Azure River Empire. Is this news true?" The embroidered uniform guard nodded slightly and said, "Lord Zhong, Lord Yu beside you is also a member of the embroidered uniform guard, so you should know how we do things. We either keep our mouths shut, but once we speak, we never lie." "Good." Zhong Xiuzhu clapped his hands and called over an officer. He said in a low voice, "You will temporarily take over my position and order the troops in the Hungduan mountain range to retreat in an orderly manner. I have to go out for a trip. When I come back, I will give you a reward." Chapter 1076. The same news was quickly sent to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. He clearly hadn't expected the third prince to be so decisive, directly abandoning his tribe and leaving quietly with only a few elites. He planned to settle down in another dynasty and rebuild his power. If you don't remove the roots when you cut the grass, it will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Lin Yuan turned to the embroidered uniform guard captain who had come to inform him as soon as he received the news and said, "Immediately send a message to Shunning City and release the third prince, who is anxious to return home. He hasn't seen his family for so long." He must be itching to reunite with his brothers, right? That's right, it's it and not him. The 13th prince of the Shuangjian dynasty had truly died in the first clash between the Blood Liao Knights and the Blackwater army. However, due to some special reasons, the 13th prince had become one of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the Hungry Ghost path. He had been kept in captivity by the Ministry of Works for research and had been trained to be as docile as a puppy. Lin Yuan was very curious as to why the 13th prince, who was extraordinarily brave, had become one of the Hungry Ghost path and not the Azura path after his death. However, this was also one of the reasons why he firmly believed that the 6 paths of reincarnation would appear. Especially after seeing the Wine Sword mystery, the 6 paths in Lin Yuan's eyes were no longer complete. Release it. The embroidered uniform guard captain swallowed dryly. His expression was somewhat ugly as he said in a low voice, "Lord Dragon King, the Ministry of Works hasn't reported this, so you may not know some things. This existence that you call Hungry Ghost has brought us a lot of trouble. Although it's not the autumn harvest season now, the rice fields are beginning to mature. If we release it, who knows how much we'll have to pay to get it to where we need it." Lin Yuan was speechless. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said somewhat speechlessly, "Did I tell you to release it directly in Shunning City? Doesn't the Ministry of Works have a special cage? Stuff this guy in the cage and release it when we arrive at the destination. Is this so hard to understand?" But the captain of the embroidered uniform guard looked like he wanted to say something but stopped himself. He said in a low voice, "Our spies only know that the 3rd prince took a group of elites and left the Bloodridge tribe, but he wasn't one of the chosen ones. That's why we only know that the 3rd prince left, as well as the general direction he took when he left. There are too many routes to choose from, so how would we know which one is the only way? From the Frost Mirror grassland to the Wei River ferry, there was no path that one had to take, because there were too many routes to choose from. Even if the Sky Demon was causing trouble in the Central Plains, there were still no less than 10 routes to choose from. Forget it. If you can't find them, just follow Zhong Xiuzhu." Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Didn't the people we captured say that the 13th prince entered the northern frontier at the instigation of the 3rd prince's spies? Even if he didn't encounter the Blackwater army, the 13th prince would have died to his own people. That's why that guy planned to make the northern frontier take the blame from the start. Since that's the case, why shouldn't I give him a gift in return? Yes, sir. The captain of the embroidered uniform guard cupped his fists in acknowledgement. In the entire northern region, there was almost no one who hated the Frost Mirror barbarians more than Zhong Xiuzhu. Therefore, when the same news reached Zhong Xiuzhu's ears, even if the Central Plains and the south were at peace, as long as the 3rd prince didn't go along the coastline, he would definitely use his connections to block him, not to mention that there were no less than 10 routes he could take. On the other side, under the Great Wall of the northern frontier, Xiao Yan, whose black armor was almost dyed a dark brown by blood, touched the blood that splashed onto his faceplate. He reached out and hacked down a Shuangjian barbarian who was about to climb up the city gate tower. With a sunken voice, he said, "Liu Zhongwu, are you done yet?" In the distance, the bald man's voice slowly sounded. "I'm still checking if there are any malfunctions. There's still about an hour left. I'll have to trouble everyone to hold on for a bit longer." "All right." Xiao Yan's words were concise and comprehensive, but the impatience in his eyes couldn't be faked in the slightest. After all, the two sides had already begun the official battle. This battle was no longer restricted by victory or defeat. This was a battle of face after the Northern Frontiers Dragon Riders provoked the Frost Mirror barbarian. Once it began, one side had to be beaten until they couldn't raise their heads anymore. However, even if the Northern Frontiers Dragon Riders were well equipped, they still couldn't endure such a terrifying battle of attrition. Of course, the Northern Frontier Dragon Riders who were wearing heavy armor and continuously bursting with power were clearly more numerous than the Northern Frontier Dragon Riders who were killed by the enemy. If the troops under Liu Zhongwu's command were included, then the casualty ratio in this Battle of the Mountain Pass was almost 1:15. To be honest, this kind of casualty ratio wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't normal either. After all, relying on the fortifications, Even a pig could kill several frost mirror barbarian who were trying to climb up the city walls. These fellows seemed to have gone crazy. Xiao Yan once again hacked down a frost mirror barbarian as he muttered with a cold expression. He didn't even know what kind of heaven-defying thing he had done. These frost mirror barbarian cavalry even gave up on their warhorses and crossbows and directly charged at the mountain pass city walls. They didn't have any siege weapons, so they just chopped down trees and started building. They really couldn't keep up with the pace. There were even some Shuangjian barbarian who began to climb the city walls with their bare hands. This scene was simply too savage and terrifying. It's done. Prepare to retreat. In the distance, Liu Zhongwu's voice rang out once again. Everyone, bring 3 days' worth of rations and water and retreat 50 kilometers. Hearing Liu Zhongwu's voice, Xiao Yan suddenly raised his head and gave the first order to his subordinates ever since the tempo of the battle changed to one of offense and defense. The northern frontier dragon riders and the soldiers guarding the mountain pass who were still fighting on the front lines used all of their strength. In a short period of time, they actually cleared out all of the enemy troops who had climbed up or were about to climb up the mountain pass. Then, they didn't even bother with the next wave of enemies and all ran down the city walls. Riding on the war horses and demonic beasts that had been prepared long ago, these northern frontier soldiers didn't even communicate with each other. Moreover, their faces were filled with exhaustion. There were even some who were so tired that they directly tied themselves to the backs of their mounts and fell asleep. Very quickly, almost all of the northern frontier soldiers retreated from this mountain pass. The frost mirror barbarian cavalry who climbed up the mountain afterwards were all dumbfounded. They had spent so much effort to fight their way up, but in the end, this place had become an empty city. Originally, they were unafraid of death when they charged at the city walls, and were rejoicing that they weren't attacked when they climbed up the city walls, but at this moment, all of that vanished into thin air. The enemy had wanted to run from the very beginning, but they had been desperately cheering themselves on from behind. Just what were they trying to achieve? Chapter 1077. The news of the mountain pass falling into enemy hands was immediately reported to the command system set up in the northern frontier. However, it did not attract the attention of many people. Including Lin Yuan, the entire command level of the northern frontier only indifferently brushed this matter aside. After all, although this matter was not part of the initial plan, if it could be carried out smoothly, it would definitely be a heavy blow to the Shuangjian dynasty. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Xiao Yan pulled on the reins, controlling the demonic beast under him to head towards the mountain pass. He turned his head to look at Liu Zhongwu beside him, his eyes filled with a bit of coldness. He said in a deep voice, "Are you sure that everything has been arranged properly, and that there will not be any mistakes?" Liu Zhongwu did not say anything. He only estimated the time in his heart, and slowly raised his hand to cover his ears. Boom! A shocking sound reverberated. Even after running at full speed for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, they could still see the outline of the mountain pass. After the loud sound, it suddenly turned into dust and scattered stone fragments that filled the sky. Even though they were so far away, Xiao Yan and Liu Zhongwu could still feel a terrifying wave of qi pushing them backwards. This is the gunpowder that Lord Dragon King developed. A light flashed past Liu Zhongwu's eyes, and he had a thoughtful expression. Although the Tianwu world emphasized on cultivation, the technology in various aspects was not considered backward. Although the various facilities seemed strange to Lin Yuan, their practicality did not lose to the various technological products that he had seen in his previous life. However, the biggest difference between the two was that in a world where cultivation existed, even if the development of technology was not weak, it was still a side branch of cultivation. For example, those so-called city defense cannons and floating vehicles could not be separated from the energy supply of cultivators. It could be said that any technological products could only be used in the hands of cultivators, and it was absolutely impossible for mortals to use them. Even if this world also had the existence of items like spirit stones, it was obviously not as convenient as the novel where spirit stones were placed and activated by a small formation to turn the spirit stones into various technological products. However, Lin Yuan's creativity was clearly different from the scientists of the Tianwu world. He combined what he had seen and heard in his previous life, as well as the various skills he had learned later on, to continuously provide the Ministry of Works with ideas. Then, he relied on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to provide the Ministry of Works with a large amount of research funds, allowing them to experiment and make mistakes. Only then did they come up with quite a lot of advanced technology. For example, the cement used to build the Northern Frontier's Great Wall was a magically modified version of the one used in the Tianwu world. The price of the raw materials was enough to make any cement merchant in his previous world leave while cursing. However, for the entire Northern Frontier, this was just a small amount of money. After the cement was put into use, many construction projects had saved a lot of time and materials. Overall, it was still a profit. More importantly, cement didn't require energy to operate. Even if an ordinary person mastered this technology, they could quickly build an incomparably magnificent building. As for the gunpowder, it was also an idea proposed by Lin Yuan. The Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works had magically modified it. The raw materials had undergone a huge change, and it could be said to be extremely expensive. However, it was worth mentioning that the might of the magically modified gunpowder was incomparably terrifying. After 50 kilograms of gunpowder was detonated, the power was even comparable to the full-strength attack of a level 3 Void Realm cultivator. If one directly carried a ton of gunpowder and detonated it together, it might even be comparable to the full-strength attack of a false god expert. Although the gunpowder that Xiao Yan and Liu Zhongwu had buried under the mountain pass didn't stop, it was estimated to be around 300 kilograms. The terrifying power of the explosion instantly shattered the incomparably majestic mountain pass. As for those Northern Frontier barbarians, before the gunpowder was detonated, they were probably still counting the various resources that they had deliberately left in the mountain pass to buy time. Therefore, if there were no accidents, those Frost Mirror barbarian who had entered the mountain pass or were near the mountain pass at that time would probably have their corpses vaporized in the explosion. The most terrifying thing was that this black technology created by Lin Yuan, although it required a series of auxiliary equipment to ensure the safety of the operator to explode with terrifying destructive power, it still didn't have any requirements on whether the operator was a cultivator or not. Even if the one who detonated the gunpowder was an ordinary person, the power of the explosion wouldn't be weakened in the slightest. Xiao Yan cast a sidelong glance at Liu Zhongwu, who seemed to be deep in thought, and said expressionlessly, "It seems that the gunpowder shipped by the Ministry of Works is much more terrifying than we previously imagined. No wonder when I suggested it, Lord Dragon King didn't even have any intention of objecting and directly agreed. It seems that he already knew the terrifying power of this gunpowder. However, if you have any other ideas, I advise you to put them away as soon as possible. You should know that the output of the Ministry of Works is shockingly low. If there really is something good, let alone you, even Li Zhongsheng might not be able to get it." Speaking up to here, he smiled and raised the thick-backed machete in his hand in the direction of the mountain pass ruins. He roared, "Now, it's time for us to attack." The time it took for a stick of incense to burn wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. By the time Xiao Yan's group returned to the mountain pass that had already turned into ruins, their footsteps had already begun to slow down. This was because there were all kinds of ruins, broken limbs, and minced meat all around them. There were even some places where no one could be seen, but there were large patches of blood. Of course, the toughness of cultivators' lives was also something that everyone knew. Even though the incident had happened suddenly, there were still quite a few vigilant Frost Mirror barbarian who had promptly mobilized their vital energy and aura energy to protect themselves. Although most of them still couldn't escape this calamity, there was still a considerable portion of Frost Mirror barbarian who had survived. Right now, under the command of some tribal leaders, they were cleaning up the rubble that had scattered in all directions due to the explosion. At the same time, they were also continuously searching for the Frost Mirror barbarian who had been crushed under the rubble but was still alive. Suddenly, they saw the Northern Frontier soldiers who had previously abandoned the mountain pass and gave them a huge surprise turn back once more. The hearts of some tribal leaders immediately sank with a thump sound. They gloomily looked at the Northern Frontier soldiers, quietly clenching the machetes in their hands. Xiao Yan calmly looked at the increasing number of Frost Mirror barbarian soldiers. Suddenly, he grinned, stretched out his hand, and pulled out the divine crossbow from behind him, aiming it at the Frost Mirror barbarian in front of him. Whether it was light cavalry or heavy cavalry, mobility was the most important thing. Even heavy cavalry had to maintain a certain speed to be able to cause damage to the enemy. However, the environment of the ruins was indeed not suitable for cavalry to charge. Therefore, even though there were still many Frost Mirror barbarian soldiers who had been severely injured, in Xiao Yan's eyes, they were still lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Chapter 1078. Lin Yuan, who had been observing the battle through the eye of God, had also been paying attention to the battle at the pass. Even Xiao Yan and Liu Zhongwu, who had detonated the gunpowder, didn't know as well as he did how many Frost Mirror barbarian had died in that terrifying explosion, and how many had lost their ability to fight. Some might even have to live the rest of their lives as cripples. There had never been a fixed number on the strength of the Shuangjian dynasty, because this dynasty was simply too unique. Once the children of the Frost Mirror tribe reached adulthood, they would have to leave the tribe alone and go to the grasslands bordering the Hengduan mountain range to hunt a large carnivorous beast or even a spirit-awakening realm demon beast. If they could successfully hunt and return to the tribe alive, they would be considered to have completed their coming-of-age ceremony. They would have their own tents in the tribe, and at the same time, they would have the right to marry and have children. The coming-of-age ceremony didn't sound difficult, and both hunters and monster slayers would often do it. However, in reality, the stronger the target during the coming-of-age ceremony, the higher their status in the tribe would be in the future. Apart from the miscellaneous benefits, it also meant that they would receive the most resources from the tribe in the future. Whether it was their chances of becoming a cultivator or their achievements in cultivation, they would be able to reach a level that others could only look up to. Therefore, when the children of the Frost Mirror tribe went through their coming-of-age ceremony, it could be said that they were gambling with their lives. There were even cases where they hunted wisdom realm demon beasts as mortals. Of course, on the other hand, the children of the Frost Mirror tribe who successfully completed their coming-of-age ceremony were less than 1 in 10. To survive in a harsh environment like the Frost Mirror grasslands, the main thing was not bravery or unity, but simply having a large number of people. On average, a Frost Mirror barbarian would have 8 to 12 wives in his lifetime. Unless there was something wrong with his body, he would usually have over 100 children. It was already rare for more than half of these children to survive. The chances of those who survived completing their coming-of-age ceremony and becoming the warriors of the tribe were even lower. There were even families with over 100 children, but none of them survived to adulthood. It was precisely because of this practice that everyone in the Shuangjian dynasty could be said to be a soldier. Any adult Shuangjian Ren was not to be underestimated. Even Lin Yuan wasn't sure how many soldiers the Shuangjian dynasty had left. He couldn't even tell who would win if the demons from the Hengduan mountains invaded the Frost Mirror prairie. However, it was clear that in this operation to plunder the northern frontier, the old Khan had pulled all the troops he could dispatch to the northern frontier. Following the explosion planned by Xiao Yan and Liu Zhongwu, at least half of this force was lost. Blackwater Army, prepare to press forward. Lin Yuan's indifferent voice sounded in the command system. At the same time, the Blackwater Army, who had been waiting for a long time, poured out of the border cities that formed the Great Wall of the northern frontier. They passed through the rugged mountain roads that the Frost Mirror barbarian was unwilling to cross before, and rushed toward the pass that had been turned into ruins. Cooperating with all kinds of demon beasts that were temporarily dispatched as mounts and were good at moving in the forest, the Blackwater Army burst out at an unimaginable speed and rapidly approached the battlefield. Indeed, as Xiao Yan said, the Blackwater Army was almost completely annihilated in the previous battle with the Sky Demon. However, everyone neglected one important thing, which was that the Northern Frontier Academy was continuously providing talents to the Northern Frontier. As long as Lin Yuan had enough equipment, let alone one Blackwater Army, he could even raise 10 Blackwater armies. Other than the veteran Blackwater Army like Zhao Guangchong and Qin Yu who had followed the original plan to wipe out the Immortals in the Northern Frontier, The new Blackwater army that had been replenished later had actually been scattered by Lin Yuan in various border cities. He was very clear that it was a very foolish act to put all your eggs in one basket. Therefore, no matter how Liu Zhongwu and Li Zhongxing assured him, it was useless. Lin Yuan still made a backup plan. However, at that time, he did not expect that this army that was only used to ensure the safety of the northern frontier would become the straw that broke the camel's back. Once the Blackwater army finished surrounding the Frost Mirror cavalry, even if the old Khan had wings, he would not be able to escape from this battle of annihilation, completely annihilating all the troops that the Shuangjin dynasty could deploy. This idea was too terrifying. It was so terrifying that even if the other 5 dynasties were afraid of the army of the northern frontier, they could not ignore it. However, this idea was too tempting. Thinking about it, the Frost Mirror grassland that had lost most of its troops to the northern frontier was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. As long as the various departments of the northern frontier operated, it would not take long for them to completely devour the Shuangjin dynasty, turning the original 7 dynasties into 6 dynasties. In addition, there was also the Chuyun dynasty, which was also severely damaged. Then, excluding the existence of the demonic beasts, the northern frontier would be a unique existence. The Chuyun dynasty would be ranked last, but it was also unique. The other 4 dynasties would be ranked in the middle. If they could digest the Frost Mirror grassland, even if Lin Yuan did not do anything to the Hengduan mountain range, the Endless Sea, and the demonic beasts in the southern wasteland, Lin Yuan would only need 10 to 20 years to easily unify the entire Tianwu whirl. Moreover, in this process, the resistance that Lin Yuan would face would be much smaller than expected. After all, the unification of the Tianwu continent was something that everyone wanted. The world would definitely use all kinds of methods to cooperate with Lin Yuan to unify the Tianwu continent. Even the primitive creatures would help Lin Yuan because of this. After all, apart from the guardians of the heavenly gate that the real world did not dare to touch, everyone had the same goal, which was to patch up the Tianwu world and wait for the rare treasure that could kill Hongjun to appear. When the time came, it would depend on who could obtain the treasure. However, if anyone tried to interfere with this process, they would definitely die without a burial place. After all, if the current situation was maintained, with the 7 great empires standing on equal footing, and without the existence of a unified empire, then the existence of the human king would naturally become a joke. At that time, even if Lin Yuan, the king of hell, and the celestial emperor, who was hiding somewhere, went all out, it would be impossible to meet the conditions for the completion of the 3 realm. Since that was the case, then let's do it. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes. Through the eye of God, he observed the continuously running Blackwater army, as well as the northern frontier dragon riders and Frost Mirror barbarian who had already started fighting. Chapter 1079. In the ruins of the pass. Jeeb tried his best to adjust his breathing. He put a sharp arrow on the bowstring and looked around vigilantly. It was obvious that the battle between the 2 cavalry units wouldn't be intense. However, no one would have expected that one of the cavalry units would hide and assassinate in the ruins while the other would search the ruins under constant suppressive fire. In Frost Mirror language, Jeeb was a godly archer. Generally speaking, unless the children of the Shuangjin dynasty were born with top-notch bloodlines, they would not have a name when they were born. Similarly, after they reached adulthood, the tribe's wise men and leaders would give them names according to their achievements in battle. For example, Brave Oral and Ku and Mighty Oral and Ku were the 2 names that appeared most frequently. After all, if a mortal could successfully kill a demon beast, he deserved such a name. But at the same time, because such names appeared so frequently, to the people of Frost Mirror language, these 2 names were no different from a Go or Da Nyo. Jeeb was very satisfied with his name, because he had risked his life to get it. At that time, he was still a mortal who had not stepped on the path of cultivation, but he had hunted down a demon beast of the wisdom state with his sharp archery, flexible mind, and various traps that he had set up in advance. At this moment, Jeeb, who was escorted into the ruins by the black-armored cavalry, suddenly felt like he had returned to his youth. He was just like the mortal boy who was targeted by a wisdom state demon beast. It could even be said that the situation now was much more dangerous than that time. There was no feeling of reminiscing about the past, nor was there any sign of blood rushing to his head or heart racing. Jeeb only felt that his scalp was numb and an uncontrollable chill was spreading all over his body. At that time, he was just a mortal. When he faced a wisdom state demon beast, he was as fragile as a porcelain doll. However, he knew that demon beasts were much easier to deal with than human beings. However, at this moment, facing the powerful soldiers of the northern frontier, he could not think of any way to get out of this situation no matter how hard he tried. One after another, the Frost Mirror cavalrymen were shot to death by the northern region soldiers or dragged out of the ruins where they were hiding and killed. Strangely enough, the northern region soldiers didn't make a single sound during the entire process except for the sound of their breathing, footsteps, and the sound of their triggers being pulled. On the other hand, it was his fellow Frost Mirror cavalrymen who seemed to be on the verge of death and roared in rage as if their minds were on the verge of collapse. Jeeb clung to the wall of the ruins and hid himself in the shadows. He swallowed his saliva and looked at the horses not far away. In the past years, he had never failed to live up to the name Jeeb. Although he was not as elite as the Xueliao Knights, he was still a famous archer in the tribe. Whether it was against demon beasts or soldiers of other dynasties, Jeeb had never missed his target so far. However, the armors of the soldiers of the northern frontier, there was no gap at all. It was so thick that it made him desperate. Therefore, he had to run away. He could only run away. He stuck out his tongue and licked his dry lips. Listening to the footsteps that were getting closer and closer, Jeeb slowly pulled the bowstring and aimed at the ruins in the distance. He did not dare to pull the bowstring fully. After a short calculation, Jeeb loosened his fingers that were pinching the arrow. Whoosh! The sharp arrow stuck close to the ground and flew out with an almost undetectable sound. This was Jeeb's famous skill. When he was hunting on the Frost Mirror grassland, he often used this kind of arrow to break the limbs of the prey or directly hit the soft abdomen of the prey. However, at that time, he had never thought that he would one day shoot this kind of arrow at his own people. A moment later, a scream was heard. The footsteps of Jeeb, who had been quietly approaching, suddenly became hurried. He rushed towards the direction of the scream. Out of the corner of his eye, Jeeb saw that the black-armored northern soldier was getting farther and farther away. Joy flashed through his eyes, but he didn't immediately rush out of the ruins where he was hiding. Instead, he waited for a moment to make sure that there were no other footsteps nearby. Then, he rolled out of the shadows and jumped out. After getting up, he didn't waste any time to turn around and run straight towards the area where the war horses were. After all, the arrows of the soldiers of the northern frontier were really terrifying. It could be called a one-man army. A soldier of the northern frontier was holding a divine crossbow. With a light pull of the trigger, hundreds of thousands of arrows were shot out. Facing the rain of arrows from the secret territory, any dodging was meaningless. It was better to take advantage of the time when the soldiers of the northern frontier did not react and directly get on the horses and leave. The plan went smoothly. Until Jeeb turned around, not many soldiers of the northern frontier were aware of his actions. Jeeb did not intend to leave after saying a few harsh words. He directly turned around and ran in the direction of the Frost Mirror grassland. After running for nearly an hour, he finally got rid of all the soldiers behind him. Jeeb took a deep breath. His face, which was blackened by the wind on the grassland, showed a smile of surviving a disaster. However, before he could laugh out loud, soldiers in black armor appeared in his sight again. Jeeb could recognize that these soldiers in black armor were not from the same army as the soldiers in black armor. This was because the two words Black Water were engraved on their gauntlets. However, in the entire Tianwu continent, who did not know that other than Shenlin Jun, the Blackwater Army was the only powerful army that could form a battle formation and collide with the Xueliao cavalry? But the question was, why would the Blackwater Army appear here? And why did the Blackwater Army seem to be coming from the direction of the Frost Mirror grassland? Jeeb opened his mouth but did not have the chance to speak. He saw a Blackwater Army soldier lift a black tubular object towards him. Bang! A sound that startled countless birds spread out. Jeeb's head flew in all directions like a shattered watermelon. The Blackwater Army soldier who shot Jeeb did not show any emotion on his face. He just said indifferently, "There really are people who slipped out. Let's spread out and continue to search the surrounding area." Lord Dragon King said that this time, we must directly cut off the claws of the Shuangjian dynasty. We must not let a single barbarian go. Yes, sir. The Blackwater Army nearby all agreed. They carried the black muskets in their hands and scattered in all directions. These scattered Blackwater Army soldiers vaguely formed a large net, trapping the dragon riders of the northern frontier and the soldiers of the pass who slipped through the net. Chapter 1080. The Shuangjian dynasty could be said to have suffered a crushing defeat. It had come quickly, but it had also fallen quickly. Even Lin Yuan hadn't imagined that the Frost Mirror barbarian soldiers would be so weak in front of gunpowder. However, when he thought about it, it wasn't that surprising. After all, in his previous life, the fall of the Qing dynasty was something everyone knew. There was also the Ming dynasty's Divine Machine Army. They had also used gunpowder to force the grassland cavalry to flee. Although these grassland cavalries of the Qianwu world were all cultivators, the gunpowder developed by Lin Yuan's Ministry of Works was not the original formula. Even cultivators would be as weak as a joke in the face of firearms of this scale, especially when they had a certain amount of gunpowder in their hands. Although the primitive creatures and the prime of Tongtian didn't dare to think about it, killing a few native false gods of the Qianwu world was not a problem at all. Turning his gaze slightly, Lin Yuan's gaze fell on another place. The third prince led the 27 Blood Liao cavalry south along the Wei River, not daring to enter the northern frontier. At the same time, he was worried that he would be targeted by the Sky Demon. So even though the group was small, they didn't dare to increase their speed. Soon. Once we cross that hill, we'll reach a ferry. I've already had people prepare supplies and clothes there. Once we get there, we can rest for a while. While no one is watching us, we can cross the river and enter the Azure River dynasty. The third prince's voice slowly rang out. It was unknown whether he was comforting himself or trying to boost morale. Hearing that they were about to reach their destination, the surrounding Blood Liao cavalry's expressions clearly improved. However, when they crossed the hill and reached the ferry, they didn't see any supplies. They didn't even see anyone waiting for them. Clang, clang, clang. The Shueliao knights drew their scimitars from their waists, and the 27 of them quickly formed a formation, protecting the third prince. They could smell the stench of blood in the air, but they couldn't see where the enemy was. However, they could vaguely tell that there were traces of human life here. At the very least, it had been like this an hour ago. Creak. The door of a building at the ferry was pushed open, and a man covered in blood knocked his hands against the ground, crawling out almost inch by inch. As if noticing the third prince and his group, he turned his head. His eyes were lifeless, but he continued to mumble, "Save me, save me." Before he could finish speaking, there seemed to be a huge force that dragged him back into the wooden house. What followed was strange laughter, screams, and chewing sounds, which made one's scalp go numb. A demon beast. One of the Blood Liao cavalry swallowed and tightened his right hand around his scimitar. Although they didn't live along the Wei River, they weren't very far from it. The demon beasts of the Wei River would crawl out at night to attack the various ferries and villages along the river, only returning at daybreak. This wasn't anything new. Logically speaking, the villages and ferries along the river should have worshipped a Lord Dragon King to protect them. This Lord Dragon King might be a powerful aquatic demon beast or a member of a nearby clan of demon beasts. But generally speaking, with the protection of this Lord Dragon King, the demon beasts of the nearby waters wouldn't attack human settlements. Either they had forgotten to worship him, or the Lord Dragon King they worshipped had died and this place had been taken over by other demon beasts. It couldn't be that bad, right? One of the Blood Liao cavalry wondered. Of all the times, something had to happen now? It doesn't seem like it. Another Blood Liao cavalry spoke up, his voice trembling as he pursed his lips. Didn't you see? When that guy crawled out, there were bloody teeth marks on his face. That wasn't the work of a demon beast. No matter what kind of demon beast it would have at least bitten off half of his head. How could there only be a single bite mark? As soon as he spoke, everyone felt their hair stand on end. It wasn't a demon beast, but a human bite mark. What the hell was this? A human was eating a human. One of the more rash Shueliao knights spat to the side and strode out of the wooden house. He raised his scimitar and aimed it at the wooden door that had just closed. He growled, "You there, I don't care who you are. Hurry up and come out. Don't try to scare Grandpa with your tricks." As soon as he spoke, the wooden door was suddenly pulled open. A gust of wind blew in his face, causing this Shueliao knight's expression to change. Unable to care about his embarrassment, he rolled on the ground, avoiding the gust of wind. When he got up again, he couldn't find what had attacked him. He could only turn his head and cast a pleading gaze at the third prince and his fellow soldiers. One of the Blood Liao cavalry's face was deathly pale as he pointed behind him. His lips trembled, but he couldn't say anything for a long time. His expression suddenly changed, and he threw the scimitar in his hand away, grabbing it and slashing it behind him. Poochie. The feeling of the scimitar entering his body made him feel much more at ease. What followed was a flood of doubt. These things didn't seem difficult to deal with. Their first attack was extremely fast, but it wasn't impossible to dodge. After that, he didn't feel threatened at all. As his scimitar fell, the Blood Liao cavalry turned around and kicked the thing he'd slashed. At the same time, he kicked it, sending it flying 4 or 5 meters. Only now did he clearly see what had attacked him. He was wearing coarse linen clothes commonly seen on mortals. He seemed to be humanoid, but his face was ashen. One could vaguely see dark purple liver mortis spots all over his body. The most eye-catching thing was his throat, which was as thin as a needle. He seemed to be chewing something in his mouth, but no one knew how much food he had to chew before he could swallow it down with such a thin throat. This guy was a classic monster. There was also a large amount of blood around its mouth. It was obvious that it was the one who'd attacked the humans in the wooden house. Humans' fear often came from the unknown. The Blood Liao cavalry had never seen such a monster before, and a trace of fear suddenly appeared in their hearts. This was especially true for the monster that had been slashed and kicked by the Blood Liao cavalry. It actually staggered up from the ground, as if it hadn't been injured at all. The sinister scimitar had almost torn half of its chest open, revealing the sternum and organs underneath. Chapter 1081. Lin Yuan, who was secretly observing, twitched his eyelids slightly. When his gaze fell on the monster, there was obvious doubt in his eyes. It was common knowledge that the majority of undead creatures were extremely ugly. They were rotten, damaged, or even sinister. Their bodies emitted a foul stench that was enough to make anyone who saw them feel repulsed. Even the vampires that had been glorified in countless movies and novels in his previous world were nothing more than monsters with colorless skin, deformed heads like bats, and enormous wings on their backs. The word appearance had nothing to do with undead creatures. But the undead creatures Lin Yuan had seen in the heaven martial world were rather strange. Whether it was the underworld river creatures or the undying transformed by the immortality medicine, the majority of them had retained their appearance from when they were alive. Even if they mutated, they wouldn't be too deformed. Moreover, when injured, they would display terrifying self-healing abilities. But this hungry ghost, a shriveled and emaciated body was already not bad, but it had a belly as large as a pregnant woman's and a throat as thin as a needle. It was the perfect example of deformed and monster. What concerned Lin Yuan the most was that, so far, the wound on the hungry ghost's chest had not shown any signs of healing. On the other side, Knight Shueliao, who had been the first to clash with the hungry ghost, felt his heart tremble. He growled, "This fellow only looks strange. You all saw it before. I easily injured it with a single slash of my blade. Everyone, come and help. I don't believe that this fellow will be able to stand up as if nothing happened after being cut to pieces." However, as soon as he finished speaking, a voice rang out. The wooden doors of the buildings around the ferry were pushed open, and one hungry ghost after another walked out. The third prince, whose expression had been as calm as still water, turned his gaze and saw that the person who had been dragged into the building had also been turned into a hungry ghost. He wobbled as he joined the ranks surrounding the rash Shueliao knight. Only now did the third prince realize the severity of the problem. Clenching his teeth, he said, "These things should be similar to the undying that's causing so much trouble on the northern frontier. Everyone, be careful. Don't let them injure you. These things are infectious. For now, we don't know if they'll infect you when you're injured or if they'll only turn you into a monster after you die. There's no harm in being careful." Formation. Not many people lived at the ferry, but there were quite a few people coming and going. Coupled with the permanent residents, this ferry had a population of around 50,000. So far, they hadn't seen a single living person. Even if they made the best preparations, they would still have to deal with 30 to 40,000 monsters. 28 people, surrounded by more than 40,000 monsters, were like a small boat in a storm, with the possibility of capsizing at any time. Boom! Another loud noise was heard. The third prince subconsciously turned his head, but his eyes instantly narrowed. His pupils had even shrunk to the size of needles. The commotion behind them wasn't small, and the third prince wasn't the only one who turned around. Very quickly, a figure dressed in black and red heavy armor, holding a crescent moon halberd, appeared in everyone's line of sight. Under that broken helmet, the face was similarly deathly gray, and was covered with dark purple livor mortis. However, no one present would be unfamiliar with this face. The 13th prince of the Shuangjian dynasty. Although the third prince didn't know what his 13th brother had experienced on the northern frontier, now it seemed that the 13th prince had appeared here not to escort them to the territory of the Azure River Empire. On the contrary, a monster that had been transformed into an undying had appeared at their predetermined retreat point. He had even killed everyone at the ferry in advance and turned them into this kind of monster. Moreover, he had patiently waited here to ambush them. The Imperial Secret Service, Yi Bus-hu. The third prince murmured, lost in thought for a moment. He had always envied the intelligence agencies of the northern frontier. He had even imitated the northern frontier and established his own Blood Eagle organization. But because of Frost Mirror's appearance and personality, although these Blood Eagles were elite roaming cavalry, there weren't many who could infiltrate other forces and provide him with all kinds of intelligence. But on the other hand, it was naturally not so easy for outsiders to infiltrate the Shuangjian dynasty. The third prince had originally thought that he had overestimated the intelligence agencies of the northern frontier. This time, he hadn't even brought his trusted aides and Blood Eagle members with him. He had only chosen 27 Blood Eagle knights with extraordinary aptitude and clean backgrounds to prepare and accompany him. He had almost planned to build his own force from scratch. But even so, the northern frontier had already grasped his whereabouts. That could only mean one thing. Among the 27 Blood Eagle knights at his side, there were members of the Imperial Secret Service or Yi Bus-hu. As his thoughts raced, the third prince suddenly turned his head and his gaze landed on the reckless Shueliao knight. His face turned cold, but before he could open his mouth to speak, he saw the other party reveal a sinister smile. With a shake of his right hand, the Shueliao knight crushed a tube of medicine that was like clear water. A choking smell immediately spread out. The hungry ghosts that were continuously closing in on him furrowed their brows in disgust. They all chose to circle around him and did not continue to attack the Shueliao knight. At this moment, the Blood Eagle knight thumped his chest and grinned viciously. Subordinate of the MI7, thumb-level spy, Shen-Qi, greets you. After his self-introduction, Shen-Qi bowed slightly, facing the third prince, and slowly retreated into the ranks of the hungry ghosts. Soon after, he disappeared without a trace. MI7? The third prince's expression darkened. He had some understanding of the intelligence agencies of the northern frontier, but his primary focus was still on the Imperial Secret Service and Yi Bus-hu. But this didn't mean that he hadn't heard of the MI7. In fact, the leader of the MI7, Zhong Xiuzhu, was someone who was extremely hostile to the Shuangjian dynasty. It was just that the MI7 was only responsible for monitoring the military on the northern frontier and commanding the Strategic Analysis Department, so it wasn't very well known to outsiders. Thus, the third prince had never imagined that there would be a spy by the MI7 at his side. This was why he had fallen into this desperate situation. Third brother. What the third prince hadn't expected was that the 13th prince, who had almost single-handedly cut off their path of retreat, didn't display the low intelligence of an undying. Instead, he opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Long time no see." Chapter 1082. The third prince was silent for a moment before he said, "13th prince, you are Father Khan's favorite son." This time, Father Khan attacked the northern frontier. He claimed that he wanted to plunder the wealth of the northern frontier to make up for the damage done to the Shuangjian dynasty during the war. But anyone with a discerning eye knows that Father Khan is unwilling to give up. He still likes you. Even when he is old, he still refuses to abdicate because he thinks that I am not worthy to be the next Frost Khan. Before he can confirm that you are really dead, that's not important. The 13th prince grinned, revealing 2 rows of sharp white teeth. He laughed viciously and said, "What does the Shuangjian dynasty have to do with me? I am already a dead man. You chose all of this, third brother." At this point, he paused and raised the crescent halberd in his hand. He pointed it at the third prince's ashen face and growled, "I was not captured alive, but Lord Dragon King gave me another life and a higher level of power. Third brother, do you know that your men have been following me all this time? They wanted to escape when they saw that the situation was not right. But in the northern frontier, nothing can escape the eyes of the Dragon King, and no one can escape the pursuit of the Imperial Secret Guards. So, your men ran for 2 days and 1 night, but they were still caught by the Imperial Secret Guards. When they were interrogated, I had already woken up and was listening to the interrogation." The third prince's expression changed drastically. His originally ashen face was now so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. To outsiders, the Embroidered Uniform Guard was just a secret organization established in the north. But to someone like the third prince who had seriously studied the structure of the Embroidered Uniform Guard and how they did things, these 3 words represented an existence that was like a scourge or a ferocious beast. If Lin Yuan was willing to give up power, the Imperial Secret Guards would be a sharp knife. Monitoring the officials of the northern frontier was a basic operation. Even the words of the civil and military officials of the northern frontier would be put on the desk of the Imperial Secret Guards the next morning. With this kind of ability, coupled with the special privileges of the Imperial Secret Guards, Lin Yuan and Li Zhong, as well as the Imperial Edict set up when the Imperial Secret Guards were first established, it could be said that as long as the Imperial Secret Guards were willing to investigate, there was not much that could be left in the dark. As for the interrogation, the third prince had also understood the interrogation methods of the Imperial Secret Guards, and he deeply agreed with them. There was no one in the world who was truly free of fear. Or rather, things like death and being implicated were not things that the other party was afraid of. Even if they were afraid, they would not show it on their faces, because only people with value had the right to live. So, when faced with things like interrogation, refusing to cooperate was the norm. But the Imperial Secret Guards were not a qualified judicial organization. The meaning of their existence was to do the dirty work for the northern frontier. So, the Imperial Secret Guards only had one method of interrogation: torture. If a person felt that they had a chance to live, no matter how you tortured them, they would not reveal a single secret. But on the other hand, if you did not interrogate them to find out the secrets they knew, and only continued to torture them, from the physical to the mental, once the other party's spirit had completely dissipated, there would be no need for you to interrogate them. They would naturally spill out all the secrets they knew, like beans spilling out beans. They would no longer ask for unrealistic thoughts like living or obtaining freedom. After all, entering the imperial prison of the Imperial Secret Guards and not the prison of the Northern Frontier Ministry of Justice, the chances of survival were currently 0. So, after revealing the secrets buried in the bottom of their hearts, they could only hope for a quick death for the sake of losing their value. The third prince was still self-aware of the standards of the people around him. So, it was obvious that the 13th prince already knew that the third prince had gone to the northern frontier because of his instigation. Even if he did not encounter the Northern Frontier Army, he would still die in an assassination attempt. Therefore, from the moment the two brothers met, there was no longer any possibility of them shaking hands and making peace. The 13th prince appeared here today for the sole purpose of killing his third brother. The third prince squinted his eyes and slowly clenched his fists. He said in a deep voice, 13th prince, I don't know what you've heard, but you have to know that we are all part of the Shuangjian dynasty. Now that the Shuangjian dynasty is facing a disaster, as I said, that's not important. The 13th prince shook his neck and said expressionlessly, besides, if you really have a sense of responsibility for the Shuangjian dynasty, you wouldn't have left the Frost Mirror grassland with these few people and planned to rebuild your own power. I know what you want to say next. It's nothing more than a feud between us brothers. Just shut the door and make a fuss. Don't implicate others. Let these people go, is that right? The third prince's expression froze. This was his 13th brother? Had he become enlightened after dying once? My good third brother, you don't think that the people around you have been telling you every day that you are as thoughtful as water, as cunning as a fox, and that you are an unparalleled sage on the prairie. You have heard so many of them that even you believe them yourself, right? Ha ha ha. Father and I have never paid any attention to your petty cleverness. Do you really think that we know nothing about what you've done? The 13th prince shook his head gently and mocked, how stupid must you be to believe such flattery? If you ask me, those people just don't know that my good third brother is a very powerful cultivator. They can't find a horse to flatter, so they can only say that your intelligence is unparalleled in the world. But in reality, let alone Lord Dragon King, anyone from the northern frontier can beat you to a pulp. Do you still not understand that your little cleverness can't be hidden from others? The third prince's chest heaved violently. In his heart, his 13th brother had always been the model of a boorish man. Anyone who claimed to be wise would not like to be mocked as stupid by a boorish man. Do you really think that I went to the northern frontier because your scheme succeeded? The 13th prince said with a hideous smile. Didn't you realize that all the assassins you arranged were by my side? Do you think this is a coincidence? I originally wanted to use this opportunity to purge all the spies you buried around me, and at the same time, turn the tables on you. It's just that your luck is pretty good. We just happened to run into the Blackwater army, so your little cleverness succeeded. But you can't imagine how much benefit I gained from dying at the northern frontier. Chapter 1083. The Shueliao Knights didn't know what kind of power the 13th prince had obtained on the northern frontier, but they were all elites of the younger generation of the Shuangjian dynasty. They knew what the 13th prince was capable of when he was alive. When the other youths of the Shuangjian dynasty were still working hard to cultivate, the 13th prince had already joined the Shueliao Knights. Even the most outstanding of the younger generation had only just joined the Bloodrush Knights. By the time they became reserve members, the 13th prince had already become one of the commanders of the Bloodrush Knights and had the qualifications to lead the Bloodrush Knights alone. It wasn't because he had the royal bloodline that he was given special treatment. It was because the 13th prince's strength had truly reached that level. The tribes of the Shuangjian dynasty supported the 13th prince to become the new Shuangjian Khan not because of the old Khan's favoritism, nor because they felt that the 13th prince was a puppet that they could manipulate and fool. Their support for the 13th prince came from the feelings and prestige that they had gained through killing on the battlefield. 28 against 1, they might not even be able to defeat the 13th prince. But now, 27 against 40,000, cold sweat appeared on the foreheads of the Shueliao Knights. This was a battle that they couldn't win, not to mention that in the dark, who knew how many spies from MI7 were conserving their strength? The third prince's eyes darkened slightly. He gritted his teeth and said, I'll stay here and stall the 13th prince. You guys think of a way to break out. It's up to fate. Huh. The 13th prince tilted his head and a cold light flashed in his grey eyes. He said in confusion, how strange. Where did my third brother, who treats everyone as fools and chess pieces, go? He gave up his life to fight for a chance for his subordinates to break out. This kind of decision wouldn't. Clang. Before he could finish his sentence, the 13th prince's expression changed. He swung his crescent halberd in a half-circle and destroyed a fist that appeared in front of him. The 3rd prince's figure appeared in the air. He took a deep breath, and his skin almost turned purple as he punched out again. The 13th prince raised his halberd and met the 3rd prince's fist head-on. The crescent halberd, which had made a name for itself on the Frost Mirror grassland and had killed countless powerful warriors from other dynasties, suddenly broke apart. The first punch is the foundation. 100% of the power, 1 million jin of force. The second punch is the beginning. 2 times the power, 2 million jin of force. The 13th prince narrowed his eyes and smacked his lips. He grinned viciously. See, Khan doesn't only favor me. No matter how many times I begged him, he wouldn't teach me the tidal art's technique. But he taught me you, he didn't hold. The 3rd prince did not speak. His eyes narrowed slightly as he hid his hands behind his back. His palms were trembling. He was one of those people with a special constitution. Although he looked gentle and weak, he could erupt with terrifying strength. Coupled with the tidal art's boost, his first punch was at full strength, the second punch was 2 times the power, and the third punch was 4 times the power. This meant that even though he was only at the Heaven Star realm, the 3rd prince's punches were enough to kill a Void Realm expert. Even a Dao Initiation Realm expert would have to avoid them. Even more frightening was the fact that not even the creator of the tidal art knew what the upper limit was. This was because under the guidance of this technique, the stellar energy in one's body would be like a tide, layer upon layer, and each strike would be far more powerful than the last. It could be said that as long as one cultivated this technique, one would be able to kill someone of the same level within 3 punches. After 10 punches, one would be able to fight across realms. But in the end, there were still rules in this world. Thus, a heaven-defying technique like the tidal art's tidal art was not something that could be used at any time. Once it was activated, one could not easily withdraw their strength. Even if it was just one strike, forcefully interrupting the tidal art circulation would require one to endure an extremely terrifying backlash. This meant that unless one killed all their opponents, it was impossible to interrupt this technique. Otherwise, the backlash alone would be enough to make one suffer. And if one was surrounded by powerful enemies, one would be doomed. Thus, cultivators who cultivated the tidal art's tidal art would usually go to one of 2 extremes. One was to suppress all their enemies in an extremely short battle. The other, in an infinitely long battle, the tidal art's tidal art could not be interrupted, and one would end up as a withered corpse. At this moment, the 3rd prince already felt a dull pain in his hands. His special constitution was extremely compatible with the tidal art's tidal art. Unlike ordinary cultivators, he did not need to accumulate strength for each strike. When he attacked, he would explode with the strongest physical strength he could muster at his current level. Even monster beasts that specialized in physical strength would not be able to survive in front of this immense strength. And every subsequent strike would be boosted by a terrifying number. But it was precisely for this reason that the 3rd prince could only attack with 3 punches at a time. If he exceeded 3 punches, crippling both his hands would be the lightest punishment. The maximum boost of the tidal art's tidal art was something that he might not even see in his entire life. "Third brother, there's still one last punch, right? What are you waiting for?" The 13th prince tossed the halberd in his hand to the side. A sinister smile still hung on his ashen face as he said in a deep voice, "Attack me. Let's see if you can kill me with 1 million kilograms of force." The moment he finished speaking, the 3rd prince's expression had already turned extremely ugly. Because he suddenly realized that his 13th brother's words earlier might not have been purely mocking him, nor was it because he had received instructions from the northern frontier to attack his confidence. Just as he had said, the 3rd prince's cleverness was due to his arrogance. Many of his trusted aides were probably spies planted by the 13th prince, his father, and even his other brothers and sisters. His arrogance in his cleverness. Had he always been a caged bird? "Since you know my strength, then you should also know that you will definitely not be able to take on this level. The third prince's eyes narrowed slightly as he tried to control the change in his expression. The 13th prince held the halberd in one hand and smiled. That's why I said to let you attack me. If I don't let you see it with your own eyes, how will you understand what kind of strength I have gained thanks to you? Boom. The sonic boom almost completely replaced the 13th prince's voice. 4 million jin of pure physical strength, coupled with the tidal ART's maximum power, the third prince's third punch, which he regarded as his trump card, smashed out fiercely. Chapter 1084. Lin Yuan could see that under the third prince's punch, the space was crumbling and the heaven and earth were shaking. It had almost reached the limit that the heaven and earth could bear. After all, it was not a complete world. It could not even be considered a medium-class world. This level of power could not even cause a ripple in the untainted world. However, even though this punch looked terrifying, it was actually nothing much. Compared to a false god expert's full strength, which could even silently shatter a corner of the world, this kind of mighty power could only affect the world for a moment. After the punch, everything would return to normal. Even so, Lin Yuan's eyes did not have the slightest ripple. Just like the 13th prince, he had a ferocious smile on his face from the beginning to the end. If the ugly face full of livor mortis was removed, such a smile might not be ferocious. It could only be described as the indifference and confidence that everything was under his control. There was no suspense in this battle. The Hungry Ghost Realm, one of the 6 realms, was not that simple. The 6 realms was what the Buddhism sect called it. However, that was only the operation of the Buddhism sect and Hongjun. Just like how the Ashura tribe created by Ancestor Ming also became a living creature of the Buddhism sect. In many of the Buddhism sect scriptures, they tried to translate the Hungry Ghost Realm into the Ghost Realm. However, the closer it was to the era of myths, the more it was called the Hungry Ghost Realm. Because at that time, myths had not yet declined, and the netherworld was not an existence that the so-called Holy Mountain of the West could contend with. They could only plan, but could not arbitrarily change it. In the Buddhism sect scriptures, it was recorded in Volume 8 of the Mahayana chapter. The so-called hungry ghost was often hungry and weak, so it was called Hungry Ghost. The hungry ghost mentioned by the Buddhism sect was formed by people who had bad karma, such as refusing to help others, stealing, and not helping others when they were in trouble. After death, they would fall into hell and become a hungry ghost that suffered from hunger all day long. But in fact, the Hungry Ghost Realm was an independent world. It belonged to one of the 6 realms. Like Ashura, it was a living creature that was born in the netherworld. Hungry ghosts were not seen in the later generations, so they were often described by the Buddhism sect. They were divided into 3 categories: external handicapped ghosts, hungry ghosts, and eating handicapped ghosts. But a real hungry ghost wasn't a fallen spirit that was tormented. True hungry ghosts were creatures of the netherworld. Compared to the hungry ghosts in the Buddhist scriptures that could be seen with the naked eye, true hungry ghosts were also spirits that could not be seen. However, they were born with the ability to devour everything. In other words, hungry ghosts could devour anything they wanted to devour, whether it was tangible or intangible. In this state, hungry ghosts would have the ability to devour anything they wanted to devour. This also meant that no matter how much power the third prince used, he would not be able to kill the 13th prince who had transformed into a hungry ghost. This was because in this situation where the first 2 punches were blocked, no matter how terrifying the third punch was, as long as it was not a power of the same level as the Joss flame that could mobilize the rules, it would be eliminated by the hungry ghost's devouring ability and be converted into the power that the hungry ghost temporarily possessed. Of course, this was just an ordinary hungry ghost. If it was a hungry ghost pathmaster like the 13th prince, although Empress Pingshan, who had been tricked by Hongjun and caused the Wu tribe to collapse, was trapped in the netherworld, she had done many things. For example, Bai Qi, Kai Yu, and the others were all transformed from Wu tribe members. Kai Yu, in particular, was one of the few Wu tribe members who had a primordial spirit. Compared to other Wu tribe members who only relied on their physical bodies, the upper limit of their growth was much higher. It was only because the system that Lin Yuan carried with him was the original fragment of the primitive heavenly way that he knew that the Pathmaster of the Six Paths, as one of the 9 saints of the primitive world, was not easy to deal with. This was especially so for the evil ghost, who was born like a bug. Empress Pingxin had high hopes for him. Therefore, the Pathmaster of the Hungry Ghost Path usually had a hidden ability called Devour the Heavens. The more the Pathmaster of the Hungry Ghost Path used Devour, the more powerful he would become. Furthermore, there was a certain probability that the power he devoured would be permanently fixed in his body. If the 13th prince was able to devour the 3rd prince's third punch, it meant that he had a high chance of obtaining the 3rd prince's special physique and the tidal ruins end technique. In addition, the hungry ghost itself was like a bug. It was even possible for him to see the maximum amplification of the tidal ruins end technique. After all, the power of the hungry ghost was truly endless. The more enemies it faced, the stronger it would be. As long as it was not an almighty who could casually use the power of incense, it would become stronger and stronger. In battle, with the assistance of the Devour ability, it was almost like a perpetual motion machine that could last forever. Hungry Ghost Path, Devour. As the fist approached him, the smile on the 13th prince's face grew wider and wider. Finally, at the moment when the fist was about to touch his face, he slowly activated his Devour ability. Suddenly, a large amount of black fog erupted from the 13th prince's body. Like numerous spirit snakes, it coiled around the invisible fist force in the air and nibbled away the power of the 3rd prince's attack bit by bit. A puzzled expression gradually appeared on the 3rd prince's face. He did not have a vision similar to Lin Yuan's Eye of God. Naturally, he could not see the hungry ghost's power devouring his fist force. However, he could clearly sense that his power was rapidly weakening. Furthermore, the closer he got to the 13th prince, the weaker his power became. The fist landed on the 13th prince's face. However, the scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere was not what the 3rd prince had imagined. It was more like a weak and powerless ordinary person throwing out a punch with all his might. However, it did not even move a hair on his opponent's head. This is, the 3rd prince was momentarily at a loss. The pain from his hands prevented him from falling into confusion. Everything was clearly real. Then, why did his power suddenly disappear? Third brother, you're really strong. The 13th prince still had a smile on his face. He maintained his original posture and did not move at all. However, he could sense that his body was filled with an incomparably tyrannical power. It was like a wild horse that had escaped its reins. No matter what, it could not be restrained. It only wanted to vent and destroy everything in front of it. However, he paused for a moment. Then, he changed the topic and said with a smile, "If you had thrown out such a punch in the past, I'm afraid I wouldn't even have a complete corpse." How laughable. In order to maintain the image of a so-called wise man, you can even abandon such a powerful power. Someone like you still wants to inherit the position of Khan Shuang Jiantian? Chapter 1085. Victory and defeat have been decided. Zhong Xiuzhu, who was hiding in the dark, had a sharp glint in his eyes. He gestured with his hands, and the MI7 agents who were lying in ambush immediately began to move. Their real purpose of lying in ambush here was not to kill the third prince. Or rather, that was not their current purpose. The hungry ghosts were creatures of the hungry ghost path, but there was no hungry ghost path in the Qianwu world. Therefore, the birth of a hungry ghost like the 13th prince was already a coincidence. He even had to thank the Nether River Patriarch, who had introduced the Nether Blood Sea to the Qianwu world. He had sent capable generals like the Hungry Ghost Path and the Azura Path to Lin Yuan. However, the corpses that the 13th prince had turned into hungry ghosts were not hungry ghosts. In a sense, they were indeed the type of hungry ghosts described in the scriptures of Buddhism. In comparison, the variants in the Qianwu world were obviously much more terrifying. Because they were contagious. Just like zombies, once these hungry ghosts hurt their enemies by biting them, they would quickly turn their enemies into hungry ghosts. Although there were more and more undyings in the northern frontier, it was only because too many people had died to the undyings. In addition, the matter of the elixir of immortality had not been dealt with properly. The outer god of the heavenly passage realm had led the undyings to work together with Shu Yang, Lei Fan, and the others. Only then had the power of the Nether Blood Sea erupted and almost turned the entire northern frontier into the underworld. Except for the undyings that had been transformed by the elixir of immortality, the vast majority of the undyings had been transformed into existences that wandered the northern frontier. This was unavoidable. However, the undyings in the northern frontier did not have the ability to infect others. If these hungry ghosts were left unchecked, not to mention whether the northern frontier would be affected, the nearby Frost Mirror, Qingjiang, Yunyu, Deadwood, Southern Wasteland, and even the Hungduan mountain range would be greatly affected. They might even turn into ghost regions. At that time, the world would be filled with hungry ghosts. Regardless of whether the karma mentioned by Buddhism or the fate mentioned by Taoism actually exists or not, there must be something worthy of reverence for Daoist Red Cloud and others to be so fearful. Therefore, Lin Yuan really didn't want to bear this sin. After all, the main forces of the Northern Frontier Army were still in the Hungduan mountain range and had yet to be fully withdrawn. The additional Blackwater Army and the Northern Frontier Dragon Riders were still at the Northern Frontier Great Wall hunting down the Shuangjin dynasty's army. The Association of the Shifter Emperor was in charge of searching for the Northern Restoration Society. The Imperial Brocade Guards were in charge of maintaining the stability of the northern frontier. Night Buyao was mostly scattered across the Frost Mirror Plains. Apart from the Mi-7, there was no one else to mobilize. They could not ignore the wandering Sky Demon and ask the Fallen Star Army and the Northern Battlefront Army to come here, could they? Zhong Xiuzhu put a silver mask on his face and shook his dark green windbreaker. He said in a deep voice, "I think you all know what we are going to face next. So, let me make it clear. These hungry ghosts must be wiped out here. If you are accidentally hurt, I can only say that don't take any chances. Just kill yourselves. After you die, you will be conferred a posthumous official title, which will bring good fortune to your descendants and relatives. If you bring the trouble out of here, hehe, even exterminating 10 families is a light punishment. Understood?" The group of Mi-7 agents agreed one after another. No matter how serious the internal strife within the northern region was, there was one thing that was certain, and that was that business was done according to the rules. Even if the two sides were sworn enemies, there would never be the slightest bit of selfishness or deliberate behavior when doing business. Therefore, after Zhong Xiuzhu said that the northern region was incurable, it meant that the poison of these hungry ghosts was really incurable. Move. Zhong Xiuzhu gave the order. His figure flashed, and he had already appeared outside the port. He pulled out a thin horizontal saber from his waist. Wherever the blade passed, the heads of the hungry ghosts were immediately cut off, and then they struggled and fell to the ground. More and more hungry ghosts rushed toward Zhong Xiuzhu. However, the agents of the Mi-7 quickly filled the gap left by Zhong Xiuzhu's saber. They started to kill the hungry ghosts one by one like a meat grinder. On the other side, the third prince tried to gather his strength again. However, the strange thing was that even if he wanted to pay the price of being disabled or killed, he could not activate the tidal ruin skill. It was as if the cultivation he had accumulated for many years had disappeared along with the strange feeling of his strength flowing away. "Third brother, we are brothers. Do you have any last words? I will try my best to satisfy you." The 13th prince looked at the depressed third prince, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He said in an extremely serious tone, "Last words, her." The third prince revealed a sorrowful expression as he said in a low voice, "What else can I think now that things have come to this? Arislan, I only hope that you can use your strength to protect the Frost Empire on account of the fact that you are of the royal bloodline of the Frost Empire, and on account of the fact that Father Khan dotes on you so much, to protect the Frost Empire. At the very least, protect the Shueliao tribe." The 13th prince did not continue the conversation after he finished speaking. After a long while, He sighed faintly and said in a low voice, "If only you were really my third brother." Unfortunately, these words will never come out of my third brother's mouth. You are second brother, right? The second brother who was declared to have died prematurely when he was born. The third prince remained silent. The 13th prince continued, "My father once told me that he had hundreds of sons, but the most promising ones weren't me or my third brother. Instead, it was the second son who was declared to have died the moment he was born. However, due to some special reasons, second brother had no choice but to die because he would never be able to inherit the Mirrorfrost court. But I never knew why. Can you tell me, second brother?" The third prince slowly raised his head. His face gradually changed into a fair-skinned young man with delicate facial features. A moment later, his 2 locks of hair were slowly tied up, turning into a pair of grey and white wolf ears. A fluffy grey tail also poked out of his clothes. "Do you understand now?" The second prince, who revealed his true appearance first, looked at the 13th prince expressionlessly and said, "I am my father's son, and I am also the vessel chosen by the wolf god. My parents were both humans, but I was born with the appearance of a demi-human. My father checked the ancient records. There were not many people like me in history, but they were not rare either. From the age of 15 to 55, I would gradually lose myself and become the legendary wolf god. Therefore, when I was born, I could only be a dead person." Chapter 1086. The Wolf God of the Frost Mirror Grassland. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes. Even the system could not find any information about this grassland wolf god. However, many years ago, the Frost Mirror Grassland was indeed ruled by a powerful wolf-type monster clan. However, the war between humans and monsters had lasted for too long, resulting in a gap in culture and history. What happened to this wolf-type monster clan that had disappeared long before the war between humans and monsters? Where did they go in the end? It was still an unsolved mystery. According to the bloodline, Raymond should also be of the bloodline of the demonic wolf clan. However, at that time, almost all the demonic beast clans had a common ancestor, just like the current Hungduan Mountains. The current mountain-shaking apes could still be related to Subaru if they traced their bloodline, but after a few thousand years, or even tens of thousands of years, if something happened in the middle, the mountain-shaking apes would become a separate demonic ape clan, and would no longer have anything to do with the sacred heart apes. If that wolf-type monster clan did not disappear and instead hid in the Frost Mirror Grassland, it would be impossible for them not to leave any traces behind. Unless, Grotto Heaven. Lin Yuan's eyes showed a dignified look. After all, although humans had not yet risen at that time, monster clans were everywhere. Powerful monsters were everywhere and the Hungduan mountain range could not compare to them. Therefore, a powerful clan that could occupy the Frost Mirror Grassland and rule over humans and monsters at that time was definitely an existence that stood at the top of the world. Such a clan could not have disappeared without a trace. Even if there was a gap in the era, there would be clues from all kinds of unofficial history and biographies. It would not be as simple as just a legend in the Frost Mirror Grassland. The only logical explanation was that the demonic wolf clan had participated in some major event, or perhaps they had predicted the rise of the human race in the future. Thus, they had created a paradise world for them to live in and hid it in the depths of the Heaven Martial world. Just like the Dragon Palace built in the underwater secret realm in the northern frontier. Although Lin Yuan did not find any corpses in it, he obtained some inherited memories. Therefore, he was sure that the underwater secret realm was built to take refuge. A centipede dies but never falls down. These words suddenly flashed through Lin Yuan's mind. An incomparably powerful Yarrow clan would not disappear without a sound. Furthermore, judging from the evil nature of the Frost Mirror Grassland and the fact that this second prince had appeared out of nowhere, it was likely that the Grassland Wolf tribe had been secretly controlling the Frost Mirror dynasty all this while. The so-called carrier of the wolf god, it was just a smokescreen. It was impossible for a human to give birth to a descendant with the bloodline of a demonic beast, unless the child was still in the mother's womb, and its body was already possessed by an external force, and underwent a certain transformation, Only then would it be born with the characteristics of a demonic beast. It was just like Ning Tiansheng from the Qingjiang Empire. He was clearly a reincarnated flood dragon. Even if he hadn't undergone any modifications, as his body slowly grew, a flood dragon tattoo would gradually appear on his body. This second prince is not human. It could even be said that he was not the second prince of the Shuangjian dynasty. He was the bloodline of the grassland wolf clan. He had used the power of incense to reincarnate into the appearance of a human, and disguised himself as such. Vaguely, a powerful aura descended from the sky. Lin Yuan looked over and saw a demonic wolf made entirely of blood and qi appear in front of him. The Eye of God failed to scan. It had failed 3 times in a row. Although he did not obtain any exact data, from the feedback given by the Eye of God, the opponent's cultivation level should be far above his. The blood and qi demonic wolf clawed at Lin Yuan and bared its fangs at him. It even circled around Lin Yuan. After a full 5 breaths, it said, "Black Jiao, our clan has no relationship with you, so I am not going to pretend to be polite with you. So I will be direct. The Frost Mirror Grassland is our clan's territory. If you don't want to die, stop here." "What if I don't?" Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed coldly. He stared at the blood and qi demonic wolf in front of him and sneered, "Between us demonic beasts, since when did we have to pay attention to seniority and first come first serve? If you came here with your real body, this king might show you some respect. But for a thing like you who hides its head and shows its tail, what right do you have to threaten this king?" The blood and qi demonic wolf's murderous aura burst forth. It stared fiercely at Lin Yuan, as if it could pounce and bite him at any time. The difference in cultivation level? Sorry. That was only for ordinary people. Although Lin Yuan's cultivation level was still at the 8th level of the Desolate Demon Realm, as a cheat, he could directly use the power of Joss Flames to fight others through the system. This also meant that as long as the opponent was not a monster-level existence that could instantly kill Lin Yuan before he could react, then they would not be facing a desolate demon, but a false god. With more than 400 million Joss Flames in hand, those false gods who had been accumulating for thousands of years might not be able to use as much Joss Flames as Lin Yuan. After all, they needed Joss Flames to prolong their lives, but Lin Yuan did not need them. Therefore, even if he determined that the opponent's cultivation level was far above his, no matter if he was a demonic king or an ancestral demon, he would only be able to touch the peak of this small world. An existence of this level was not qualified to make Lin Yuan obey. "Do you think that you can change this king's mind just by staring at this king?" Lin Yuan's lips curled into a sinister smile as he said coldly, "This king has his eyes on the Frost Mirror Grassland, so he has to keep it in his hands. If you have the ability, then show me your true colors and fight this king. When the time comes, the loser can just leave. If this king loses, not only will the Frost Mirror Grassland be yours, even the northern frontier will be yours. But if you only rely on your mouth, this king advises you to sleep early. Everything can happen in your dreams." It was unknown to Lin Yuan how many powerhouses there were left in the powerful demonic wolf clan, but he could guess by looking at the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. The powerful Dragon Clan of the Four Seas could only support 6 semi-divinity stage powerhouses. Although the rest of the ancestral demons also had the bloodline of the Dragon Clan, they were still members of other clans. They could only be regarded as demonic beasts with dragon blood, not the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. If that was the case, how many false gods could the demonic wolf clan, which had been in seclusion for countless years, possibly have? If they really fought, Lin Yuan would not be afraid at all. After all, as the deity king of the northern frontier god system, he had existences like Batu and Kagura as his subordinates. As long as he was willing, he could share the Joss Flames of the entire northern frontier god system. Chapter 1087. The blood-red demonic wolf still bared its fangs at Lin Yuan. But no matter what, Lin Yuan was right about one thing. Demonic beasts never cared about seniority or the rules of first come, first served. Therefore, if Lin Yuan took a fancy to the Frost Mirror Grassland and used force to conquer it, The only thing the demonic wolf clan could do was to get out of seclusion and fight the Northern Frontier group head-on. The winner would win and the loser would have to leave. Were they afraid of the Northern Frontier group? Maybe, maybe not. Lin Yuan was sure that the demonic wolf clan was not as powerful as the Endless Sea. After all, the entire Frost Mirror grassland might not be as powerful as the dragon tribe of the Four Seas in the Endless Sea, let alone a demonic wolf clan that had been hiding behind the scenes for many years. But the foundation was still there. If the demonic wolf clan really wanted to start a war with the Northern Frontier group, they could indeed give the Northern Frontier a fatal blow at this juncture. But at the same time, Lin Yuan was very sure that the demonic wolf clan would not dare to start a war. Lin Yuan still had not figured out what the Saria and the demonized black tortoise in the underwater secret realm were fighting against and why they ended up like this. He could only be sure that the demonic wolf clan was either a creature of the untainted land or from the world of his previous life. Because they had seen through Lin Yuan's background, he could leave the underwater secret realm safely. Who built the underwater secret realm? What was it hiding from? This was the missing part of the inherited memory. Lin Yuan did not even know whether the owner of the underwater secret realm had survived the disaster or not. Was he living in the underwater secret realm now, or was he too late to hide in the underwater secret realm to become a part of the Hungduan Mountains formation in the end? Anyway, he did not see any corpses in the underwater dragon palace. Occasionally, he saw a few corpses, but they were all demonic beasts with dragon blood. It remained to be seen whether the owner of the underwater secret realm was hiding from the same thing as the demonic wolf clan. But at the moment, he was sure that the thing they were hiding from was not far away from the Tianwu world. It could come again at any time. Otherwise, the demonic wolf clan would have come out long ago. How could the Shuangjin dynasty have the chance to gallop on the Frost Mirror grassland? Come out and start a war with the Northern Frontier? They were courting death. It was hard to say whether they could defeat Lin Yuan or not, but if they provoked the thing they were hiding from came out, they would be wiped out. The blood chi fiend wolf took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Then, he said coldly, "Black Flood Dragon, you seem to be certain that we don't dare to start a war with the North, right?" "No. No." Lin Yuan shook his head and said indifferently, "I'm just stating my opinion. It's very simple. I want the Frost Mirror grassland. If you are willing to give it to me, that's good. If not, you can fight with the Northern Frontier and see who wins. Aren't you afraid?" The demonic wolf glared at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan interrupted the blood demon wolf. His tone was still indifferent as he said, "There are many things that I am afraid of, but there are many things that I cannot avoid doing just because I am afraid. On the contrary, it is precisely because I am afraid that I have to grasp enough bargaining chips. As long as I have enough strength, then those who make me afraid will be trampled under my feet." As soon as his voice fell, the momentum of the blood demon wolf paused, and it looked at Lin Yuan in a daze, not knowing what to say for a while. Wasn't this a little too overbearing? He was just short of saying that he was afraid that the other forces would join hands to destroy him. In order to make sure that day would not come, he decided to strike first and destroy the other forces first. The demonic wolf was silent for a moment. It seemed to be organizing its words. Then it said, "Black Jiao, you've come this far. So you should know what the Frost Mirror grassland means to our tribe. Moreover, I don't think you can tolerate the legend of the grassland wolf god after you take over the Frost Mirror grassland. Just like the dragon tribe of the Four Seas had their own god system, the grassland wolf god was also a god system. No matter what kind of existence it was, as long as they wanted to reach the realm of immortality, they could not avoid the power of incense. Even in the untainted world, there was always a competition between orthodoxies. Just like the War of the Three Tribes, the War of Witches and Demons, and later on, when humans killed demons and ghosts, they were all fighting for the power of incense. On a macro level, the ancient conflicts between Buddhism and Taoism and the 100 schools of thought were the same. Since the Northern Frontier god system had been established, they would never tolerate the existence of the grassland wolf god. Therefore, from this perspective, if Lin Yuan was determined to take over the Frost Mirror grassland, the demonic wolf tribe might really start a war with the Northern Frontier group. Otherwise, once the legend of the grassland wolf god was suppressed and eliminated, they would naturally not be able to obtain the power of incense. Those masters who had exceeded their lifespan and relied on the power of incense to prolong their lives would die one by one. Lin Yuan remained silent. A war between god systems was never a small matter. Was it really necessary to go to that extent? After a while, the demonic wolf broke the silence again. It said, however, "It's inconvenient for our tribe to leave our secluded place. We can't fight with the northern frontier directly. Therefore, unless it's absolutely necessary, the masters of our tribe will not leave our territory. However, we will never give up the frost mirror grassland, so, at this point, it paused and growled, let's have a bet. If we win, the northern frontier will have to give up the plan to attack the frost mirror grassland. What do you think? What if I win? Lin Yuan lifted his eyelids and asked. Humph. The demonic wolf snorted and said while gritting its teeth, we'll disband the grassland wolf god system. Moreover, the masters of our tribe will join the northern frontier and become members of the northern frontier god system. We'll listen to your orders. The stakes could be considered heavy or light at the same time. If the grassland wolf god won, the northern frontier would have to pay a high price. They would only have to give up the frost mirror grassland. Under the restrictions of the grassland wolf god, the Shuangjin dynasty, which had already suffered heavy losses, would never provoke the northern frontier again. By then, the northern frontier would have strategic depth no matter whether it was recovering the original territories of the Shunwu dynasty or attacking the southern wilderness and the Chuyun dynasty. On the other hand, if the northern frontier won, although the grassland wolf god system would be disbanded and would join the northern frontier and listen to Lin Yuan's orders, it was still better than the northern frontier occupying the frost mirror grassland and cutting off the source of the grassland wolf god's incense power. The entire grassland wolf god system would be destroyed. If that's the case, I don't have any objections. How do you plan to bet? Lin Yuan asked with interest. Chapter 1088. The blood demon wolf pondered for a moment, then suddenly looked in the direction of the ferry and said in a deep voice, his name is Doryakai. If translated into the common language, it means to suppress. You have to know that no matter if it's humans or demonic beasts, a name is very important. Especially in the frost mirror grassland, there has never been a situation where a name does not live up to its name. With this name, it can be said to be the most outstanding member of the younger generation in our tribe. Therefore, our candidate is him. After pausing for a moment, it turned its head and looked at Lin Yuan, then continued, send someone from your side to duel with Doryakai. The outcome of this duel will determine the outcome of the duel. How about it? Doryakai, the meaning of suppression. A profound light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. The word suppression was not used casually. If a genius with the name suppression really lived up to its name, it meant that in this era, there was no one who could beat Doryakai in terms of talent. However, Lin Yuan estimated that the range of this was only within the hidden world wolf tribe. No matter if it was the dragon god of the four seas who was envious of him and was lured into depravity by the great old ones, or himself who could be called a cheater, or even Guan Zhaoshan who performed the taboo ceremony and gave her everything to Lin Yuan, they were all geniuses who could suppress an era. However, that was only in an ordinary era. Tianwu world was about to be repaired. The older generation of cultivators and demonic beasts were destined to be weak and fall behind. Therefore, in this era, a large number of geniuses and monsters would appear like a geyser. Just like in the novels in his previous life, the main character's golden era could be said to be an era where monsters were everywhere. In such a situation, even a cheater like Lin Yuan would not dare to say that he could suppress an era. Alright, I'll let the 13th prince fight. After all, we've already met, so I won't change my candidate. Lin Yuan replied with a smile. He wanted to see who would win between this so-called era-suppressing genius and the future hungry ghost path's pathmaster. At the same time, both the 13th prince and Doryakai had received orders from Lin Yuan or the Hidden Wolf clan. The 13th prince's gaze suddenly became profound. He smashed the broken halberd in his hand and grinned, So, my second brother is really dead. You are just a demonic beast who has taken over my second brother's body. When the broken halberd landed, a grey wolf claw suddenly stretched out from the void. Dariach's exquisite facial features did not have the slightest change in expression. However, not long after, dark purple liver mortis spots slowly appeared on his face. Transform? No, a mimicry? The 13th prince took back the broken halberd that had been stopped by the wolf claw. He raised his eyebrows and grinned. How interesting. No wonder you could exist as my third brother's shadow for so many years without being seen through. It turns out that you have such an ability. It seems that your mimicry can not only imitate the appearance of others, but also their abilities, right? When the 13th prince finished speaking, the liver mortis spots on Dariach's face suddenly disappeared. It was only at this moment that a blank expression appeared on his face. It was common knowledge that wolves were not only divided into packs and lone wolves. In many packs of wolves, there were creatures called Bay. The so-called Bay referred to the existence that lived together with the pack of wolves. In many legends, the Bay was an existence that was born with a disability due to genetic defects. Most of their limbs were of different lengths, and their two front legs were extremely short. They were completely unable to rely on their own strength to walk. They had to be placed on the back of a healthy wolf to be able to move together. However, although the Bay was a creature with a deformed and disabled body, it had to contribute to the pack if it lived in a pack of wolves. Otherwise, it would be chased out by the Wolf King and become a wandering lone wolf. It was still fine for ordinary wolves. If they became a lone wolf, they would become a lone wolf. They would still be able to survive. However, the Bay was different. Once the disabled Bay left the pack of wolves, even moving would be a problem. Naturally, it would not be able to survive. Therefore, under the premise that the Bay's movements did not change, it would either be abandoned by the pack of wolves and die, or it would quickly adapt to the environment and contribute to the pack of wolves. For example, it would make plans, arrange ambushes, and so on. Usually, a pack of wolves that had the Bay's command would be more cunning than a pack of wolves that did not have the Bay's command. It was just like a group of wandering soldiers and an organized army. There was a huge difference between them. Doriakai was like a Bay in the hidden werewolf clan. Because of the deformity in his body, he left the hidden wolf clan and secretly possessed the second prince's body. Although Doriakai was extremely talented in cultivation, he was still a disabled Bay. He could not survive without the pack of wolves. Therefore, Doriakai took the initiative to possess the second prince. He gave up his original body and became what he was now. However, mimicry was not some kind of technique or ritual. It was a special ability of the Bay. Although there were some limitations, once it was activated, no matter what kind of existence the opponent was, it could change into the opponent's appearance. If it was lucky, it could even inherit the opponent's physique and ability. Just like how it could perfectly imitate the third prince's appearance and special physique. It could even directly use the tidal wave technique. Although it was also limited by the same physique as the third prince, strictly speaking, even the third prince himself could only fight it on par with the Bays. But now, it was trying to mimic the 13th prince in front of it. It was just an experiment, but the whole innate ability directly collapsed. If it was a technique or something like that, the backlash alone would be enough to make it suffer. You want to mimic my appearance? The 13th prince gently shook his head. His grey eyes kept moving, looking very strange. Hearing Dariach's breathing getting heavier and heavier, and seeing his bloodshot eyes, the 13th prince nodded in satisfaction and said, "That's why I said that you guys don't know what kind of power I got after I died at the northern frontier. How can an ordinary person be qualified to spy on the territory of a saint?" When the 13th prince's roar ended, blood was already flowing out of Dariach's ears. It was as if his eardrums were shattered by this roar. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.